Council, if I can have your attention, please. I'd like to begin our meeting by thanking our broadcasting partners and our media partners for broadcasting and recording on our meeting. Welcome you all tonight to our annual budget meeting, and ask the clerk to open the meeting. Madam Clerk.
Under agenda item 1, I have a motion by Councilors Hilsinger and Hollingsworth that the agenda for December 9, 2019 as presented be approved.
All in favor? Carried. Any councillors with any declaration of community interest? Seeing none.
Under agenda item 3, Ontario Regulation 28409, a motion by Councilors Shoemaker and Christian, resolved that the report of the Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer dated December 9, 2019, concerning Ontario Regulation 28409 be approved for the budget year 2020.
All in favor? Carried. So, Council, before we get into the budget and the budget presentations, I want to draw everybody's attention to 4.8. There's two communications on the agenda. The first one is a communication from Jim Boniferro, the chair of the PUC, to us, and a response from me. I'm happy to confirm that the PUC was able to declare a special dividend, which we should all have the information of and consider in our deliberations tonight. I want to make a specific point to indicate that that generated that extra revenue, that profit that the PUC was able to deliver back to us and back to our community was not generated from our rate base of either distribution rates or water rates. The PUC and Councillor Christian and I have been active in this. It's set out to generate income that is non-rate based income that we can generate from our community or outside our community without affecting our rates. And we've been successful in doing that. We're going to continue to try and do that. And the board, and I appreciate this, determined that it was probably appropriate to return some of that extra income to us this year for our budget deliberations. So I want to recognize the leadership of the PUC board, and I also want to recognize the management and staff of the PUC who really have worked hard to create this value for the shareholder, which is us and our community at large. So we have $400,000 that will factor into our discussions tonight, and I want to just bring that to everybody's attention. And if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer it. Otherwise, we will move on to the budget presentations. As we go through them, we'll take questions of each of the presenters, but if you have different proposals or ideas of what you want to do that relates to that area, we ask that you not table it while we're on the presentation. The point of the presentation is was everything I said not carried through to the public at large? Okay, battling forward. Sorry. Anyway, we'll have to count on Ms. Delamatia and the other folks up there to report on it. So in any event, as we go through our budget, if we can just ask questions of the presenters that relate to their presentation, and we'll wait until we get to operating and capital to make any proposals that relate to the budget. Okay?
I have a motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Christian that City Council now proceed into Committee of the Whole to consider the following matter referred to it for consideration, 2020 budget deliberations.
All in favor? Carried. Okay.
Under agenda item 4.1, corporate services.
Mr. White?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, corporate services also includes mayor and CAO, so I'll give that presentation tonight. Just as a reminder to council on the procedure, we will go through the presentations. We are in committee of the whole. For bringing forth proposals that you may have during the consideration of the capital budget and the operating budget. Just a reminder that because we're in committee of the whole, you don't require a seconder to bring something forward. You can bring it forth and the mayor will canvass the rest of council by a straw vote just to see what items have gained sufficient support that will carry them through. At the end of our deliberations in committee of the whole, we will take a short recess while staff make sure we've got the requisite wording for the resolutions you'll need to pass, and then we will reconvene and rise out of committee of the whole and report on those. So if I can start with the corporate services presentation, just types of services, internal and external. It notes the organizational units providing the services in this area, clerks, finance, human resources, and information technology, and lists the services. Next slide. Key initiatives for these areas in 2019 for clerks, post-election administration, board and committee appointments, and policy development in the areas of the visual identity policy to be part of the implementation for our new branding, record retention bylaw, which will be coming to you shortly in January, and a procedure bylaw review. In finance, the accomplishments are revised investment policy, setting out guiding principles and goals, tax system upgrade, including a review of third-party credit card payment option, and an experiential learning project with Algoma University to develop a municipal price index. In human resources, they had the third year of leadership development using the Harvard Management Mentor Program. The paramedic transfer to DSAB, which will be effective January 1st of 2020. A request for proposal of benefits, which is now closed benefit provision for city staff, and that's being evaluated at this time. And successfully concluded collective bargaining with all our bargaining units. For 2020, I should also note information technology. I don't know if that slide got in here, Frank. It looks like it got missed, but one notable project was the successful implementation of our new telephone system, which went very well, on time and under budget, so they can be complimented for that. Key initiatives for 2020 in city clerks: alternative voting methods review for the 2022 municipal election, migration of cemetery software, licensing software, and policy development in the areas of complaints, notices, and accountability and transparency. For finance, you'll be looking at the capital financing and debt policy, user-friendly quarterly financial statements, and multi-year budgeting system implementation. For human resources, pay equity maintenance review, RFP, other contracted services, and in-house corporate training programs. And for the CAO's, CAO's office, strategic plan update, review the assess and implementation of municipal reference model and audit and accountability reports. Those reports will be coming to you at the January 6th meeting of 2020. And delegation bylaw. Into our financials, the overall budget summary is before you with a tax levy increase in this area of 3.66% overall. There are no supplementary requests or capital requests. And that's the corporate services summary. If you have any questions or need any clarifications, please do so.
Councillor Christian.
I'm just looking at the 2020 operating budget. Again, my apologies if this was covered off earlier, but I see a $38,000 drop in revenue. What is the cause for that?
Certainly, I know some of the drops in revenue were rationalization, I guess you could say, of licensing revenue and marriage license revenue. I know those were two items. As the CFO has explained before, when we prepare the budgets, some of the information that is given to staff is a 5-year average of what the actuals are for accounts. And so we do look on an ongoing basis to adjust those to reflect what we're actually seeing in our trends.
Okay. We see salaries and benefits at 4.17% increase on $291,000 change. Headcount, is the headcount the same? What accounts for the $291,000 increase?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, for salary increases that you'll see throughout the budget in all areas, what you're seeing budgeted for is a 2-year budget increase. And that's because for your budget last year in 2019, we didn't have any of our collective agreements bargained for.
Okay.
So for the 2019 budget, salaries were set at 2018 levels. And once the agreements were struck, any adjustments were paid out of a contingency fund. For this year, we are budgeting at 2020 levels because we know what the collective agreements are going to be. Overall, and I believe the CFO showed this in her presentation back on November 18th, that the budgeted salary levels seem to have taken a large jump. That's offset by a reduction in the contingency
And that was
that covers the adjustments.
Would it be accurate then to say, Mr. CEO, that like the increase is actually 2020 over 2018 as opposed to 2020?
That's correct, and I'm just going to double check with the CFO to
So,
ensure
and I
I'm
think that's an
answering.
important point to make, because a few of you have asked me that question. So, it's important that we get it out and clarify it. They're comparing the 2020 level to the 2018 level.
Okay.
Because for 2019, we
No, I
budgeted at
understand.
2018 levels because we didn't have a lot of our contracts negotiated.
And my apologies to that. I was not here for that meeting.
Yeah.
I was off. I was.
No, but it's an easy point to miss.
Yeah.
And
And I think that's
I think it
important.
was, lost in the translation to some degree.
So, and I think, Mr. Watt, you made the point, we used to have that contingency fund that we would use in not knowing what wage settlements were. So, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Michelle. So essentially, as Mr. White has said, we see this increase in salaries now because we've settled this, and we see a corresponding drop in those contingency funds that would normally hold that money. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, that's correct. And the decrease in the contingency is approximately equal to the 2019
Okay,
increase.
thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for the CAO on that budget? And the mayor budget includes obviously mayor and council, so that's all of the cost for our body. Okay, then we can move on. Madam Clerk. the next-
Agenda item 4.2, Community Development and Enterprise Services.
Mr. Vare.
Yes, thank you. The Community Development Enterprise Services, just as a reminder, covers community services, the planning department, and also community development. We've broken out the various services in the service area and also included, based on the resolution in the last meeting, for 2020 economic development and tourism. Key initiatives in 2019. There's a diversity of projects, obviously, in community development enterprise services, community art projects and community branding undertaken by future SSM. We also have the Downtown Development Action Plan and the commencement of the Plaza project. Our social equity coordinator has been working on early years system plan with stakeholders in the community. Our film person has been working hard on film attraction. Our labor force development has undertaken job fairs in the GTA. At the cemetery, we've undertaken the project for the new mausoleum, which we hope will be constructed next year. Planning's been hard at work on the official plan development, and in the transit area, we've launched the on-demand transit pilot, an innovative service on Sunday nights. Also working closely with EDC on rural and northern immigration pilot program. Our staff are providing the administration for that project, which we received an update recently on that. 2019 saw the opening of the splash pad, also the commencement of the Twin Pad Arena project. We've launched the mobile payments for parking in the downtown core, also a new partnership with social services for a transit pass. We implemented the new dock system for Alberta Bondar Marina, and also council approved the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. So key initiatives in 2020, a number of these projects will be continuing on into the new year. Just touching on a couple of the ones that are new. We have the moving into the construction round for the downtown plaza, we hope. Also the James Street Park and really the master plan for the area is underway, the planning there. We have a mountain bike trail development project. We will look to some transit refurbishment projects. We had a positive funding announcement on Friday related to that. Moving ahead with the Twin Pad project. Also a new video board at GFL Memorial Gardens in partnership with the Sioux Greyhounds, and implementing action on the Parks and Recreation Master Plan and the Cultural Master Plan. So overall, from a budget summary perspective, you'll see that revenues are up 2.3%, and the overall impact on the tax levy is 0.74% for the department. Our supplementary request to council, we do have a request to fund the arts and culture heritage sector in the community. That would be an ongoing ask of $101,000, and follows the key recommendations from the Arts and Culture Master Plan approved by council, and would enable us to move a step closer towards the investment that we're seeing in other comparator communities into their arts and culture sector. We also have a request, one-time request for $25,000 for third-party parking by law enforcement. We have conducted an RFP on that service, and this is the cost for that service. Really a necessity given that the police are not able to respond to a number of these calls given other priorities, and we think this is a more effective model for the community. We also had included a supplementary request related to youth or teen programming at the NCC. That's really dependent on the decision at the library on whether they will be operating at the Northern Community Center, but would be an alternate use for that space. Also, some smaller items related to security at the Northern Community Center, continuation of the Best for Kids program, and some funds for skating trail and block party programming. In terms of the capital requests, the larger ticket items, obviously the transit infrastructure, this funding leverages 73% funding from the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, and provides an excellent opportunity for Sault Ste. Marie to address the age of the fleet and other critical investments in our transit system. We also have $200,000 through the 4 LED lighting upgrades, and this is funded through the Green Fund and was approved by City Council. Some rehabilitation work for the Memorial Tower. And one project that we had previously brought to council that isn't on the list for capital upgrades is the renovation of a second VIP suite at the JFL Memorial Gardens. The previous analysis looked at a payback of 2.83 years for that project. We do have a couple other items, the upgrading of acrylic posts for GFL Memorial Gardens and the cap, $65,000. This comes from the GFL Capital Reserve and is a requirement from the OHL for all their facilities. And also, we were looking at the cost to implement point-of-sale systems throughout the Memorial Gardens. That's $80,000, which would enable our customers to access credit and debit machines at all the lineups in the Memorial Gardens. In terms of cemetery, $35,000 request funded through Asset Management Reserve. We had the Memorial Gardens, some site security cameras for $10,000, and also the growth projects. What we are targeting there is to apply that to the downtown development project for the downtown plaza. So that would be the entire $500,000 amount. Continuing on, $40,000 for the John Rhodes Community Center, funded through the Asset Management Reserve for some water tanks, $130,000 related to roof repairs at the Bondar Pavilion, and also $15,000 to replace some aging infrastructure for our marina sewage pump-up. So with that, last year we presented to council some key performance indicators, and we thought we'd provide an update. Budget being obviously a critical item for the spend, but also to show council the use of the services by our residents in Sault Ste. Marie. So at the GFL Memorial Gardens, we are tracking well to hit the target of 200,000 users. We were at 136,000 in Q3. And we'll go through these ones quickly. We are looking at 5,400 walkers at the Memorial Gardens. The target was 8,500. So we're a little bit behind there. We think we'll catch up in the winter months. But also on the next slide, you'll see the number of walkers at the NCC has really taken off. So we've had over 11,000 walkers utilizing that facility. On the next slide, you'll see the average age of our transit fleet is still higher than the Ontario average and Canadian average at 12.3 years. And part of the reason why the investment in upgrading our fleet is of critical importance to our transit operations. And we also provided a slide that just does the comparison related to Sarnia, Thunder Bay, Sudbury, Timmins, and North Bay related to transit investment per capita. Excuse me. The ridership, we've had positive ridership this year in transit. We think it's a couple things, the partnership with the DSAB, as well as the growth in international students at Algoma U and Sault College. So that's great to see, and we anticipate we're going to exceed our ridership goal for 2019 based on this trend. And then recreation and culture, we had 96 events at the Bondar tent, over 59,000 people are participating in events at the Bondar Pavilion. We've had on track to hit our targets related to participation in our seniors programming at both the drop-in center and the Northern Community Center. Again, on target and will exceed related to participation rates for our programming in the John Rhodes Pool and the number of swim passes. And as well, we're looking at a record year for the Ermatinger-Clergue National Historic Site, and we'll have record attendance in 2019. So the team's been doing a great job there with the events and the variety of programming that they're offering. And that's a quick summary from our area. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Gardy.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Ver. Mr. Ver, I think the youth team programming at the NCC would be a great idea in lieu of any presence of library operation. That being said, could you elaborate a bit as to what this is going to look like, timing? Will it run throughout the year, either through you or if Mr. Laming could elaborate?
You, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, yes, if council would go forth on the proposal, if the library funding is not approved, the plan would be for the city to program the space and utilize it as expanded seniors space during the daytime that would expand further at night with respect to youth and teams for open mics, activities, also access to the fields when they're not in use. And we could do different types of programming with arts and crafts, tutoring, I should say. And there's actually a program in place right now where that students are coming and reading together with seniors as well. So we would have some different options as well with the things like ping pong tables, activities to put in that space as well if that were to be the course of action.
Thank you. Could I ask one more, sir? Yeah. May I proceed? Thank you.
It's not one question. I wish it was one question per person.
It will
but
be.
It, is not
It
one
will.
question
It will
per
be
person.
two for this person right now, and that's it. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ver, and/or specifically maybe Mr. Laming. I was happy to see that there's funds for the Memorial Tower rehabilitation. Mr. Laming, is there any opportunity for any type of assistance with this $100,000 or so from different levels of government?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, yes, there is actually, as you pointed out, there is an avenue to apply for some funding towards that we will take advantage. I believe the amount is approximately $25,000 that could potentially become available for that. So if that was approved, that would be something we would come back to council to look to approve for that funding source to move forward on.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Vezo-Allen, do you have a question or two?
I have two.
There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Laming, just to elaborate on the NCC programming for youth and teens and children. Will there be a fee for service, such as, you know, if you go to the YMCA, you have a membership and that sort of thing? So will there be some revenue recovery from this programming? And have you looked at other sources for support for programming in terms of granting opportunities or possibly coordinating something with the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Bezel Allen, yes, there will be some fees involved with the program. It's approximately $8,000 as stated in the request. The overall operational request is approximately $96,000. So there would be a fee for service, but the net result would be $96,000, which mainly covers the salary of one full-time employee, full-time equivalent, and then an additional part-time resource.
Could that position be 2 part-time rather than a full-time equivalent if we're doing programming after school and on weekends?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bezel, and we plan to have it open till 9 o'clock during the week, potentially 10 on Fridays, and also Saturday and Sunday. So it would take one full-timer and a part-timer to cover that, those types of hours.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Laming. My next question is for Mr. Ver. It's in terms of the budget with the Bellevue Park Marina, which is page 85 of 375. So in fees and user charges, we do see a slight decrease of almost 5%. And in utilities and fuel, we see an increase in the budget of 25%. Could you please elaborate on that? My assumption was that the Bellevue Park Marina was doing quite well in terms of seasonal occupancy with the boaters.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezoal, and sorry, I'm just drilling in on it. I think in part, the increase in the fees is just related to the cost of those items, like in terms of the cost of the fuel, which is provided by finance. I see CFO Shell may have something to add on this one as I drill into some of the details there.
Through Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo Allen, the decrease in fees and user charges for the Bellevue Park Marina is mostly, as Mr. Ver alluded to, is for petroleum. So that has been adjusted, as well as the cost. So it was adjusting the cost of sales and the trend in the sales as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. No further questions.
Councillor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regarding the supplementary request, the Best for Kids, $6,000, that the DSAB is no longer able to contribute. My understanding is that there's $12,000 total that was going towards programming for children at the Greco and Manzo pools. I spoke with Mr. Nadeau from DSAB, CAO of our DSAB, and he's looked into it this afternoon and got back to me, and I forwarded a copy of his email to you. He came up with the fact that he is able to contribute $6,000 again for 2020, so that supplementary item is taken care of.
It's good news.
I want to thank him for that.
Appreciate the DSAB's contribution. It's great, the programming that we're able to do at those 2 facilities. That's good. Anything else, Councillor Nero?
No, that's it.
I have Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And question to Mr. Ver regarding the Memorial Tower. It's $101,000. When was the last time that we worked on the Memorial Tower? Was it not too long ago? And how much did we spend? Would you? I just thought of it now, so that's why I didn't prep you on it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni. Since I've joined the city 3 years, we haven't done any significant work on the Memorial Tower. I'd have to get back to you with the information on that in more detail on the history there.
Okay. Second question is the transit infrastructure. With the announcement that Ross Romano provided us with the $4.9 million, is this what the leverage of the 73% funding is? We have to come up with the 1.24 million, and then we receive the 4.9?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, there's 2 steps there. The province has nominated those projects through to the federal government, so that would be their share towards the transit infrastructure projects. We do still need the final approval from the federal government for their share of that money. The amount of that money, though, from the province that they've approved is actually multiple years of the infrastructure funding towards transit. So that's why that number may seem a little larger.
Okay.
We do need our money in the budget to leverage the provincial money and the federal money. What's happened now is the province has referred the matter on to the feds, and the feds actually have the big pool of money, so we're confident we should be able to get the federal money too. But we would need our contribution.
Okay, thank you. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councilor Dufour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure if my first question is for Ms. Schell or Mr. Lamming, but I'm just wondering, is the GFL suite renovation in the capital request part of our unfunded capital amount?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Dufour, no, it is not. It was, didn't reach the priority, so it would be up to council to change the priority structure. And it would increase the unfunded amount if we add it.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question was just for Mr. Lamming. For the skating trail and block party programming, which is in the supplementary request, could you give us just a quick overview of what that would entail?
Do you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour? Yes, it's a combination of a couple of things. So it would be for the skating trail, we're looking at some lighting that would be done there, as well as the block party program where we have different types of resources to host those parties to move forward. So that's what that request is entailing.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
Councilor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of my questions was already asked by Councillor Bruni. Slide 16 of the 22 slides. This is a question through you to Mr. Lamming. I'm looking at the bar graph, and clearly our investment per capita is very, very light in terms of transit investment. Early in my tenure, the transit manager at the time used to source previously enjoyed buses. Is that a process we still follow, and is it necessary to do so to fill any gaps that might exist?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, we actually purchased 4 this year from the TTC, so it is a process that we do still use. In addition to the infrastructure funding that we have had a delay in time frame, so we've had to proceed down that path this year.
And do you know offhand what the price was for those buses?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, yes, it was quite good. Anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000 a bus versus $575,000. Now these are at the end of life for the TTC, and we're treating them as new for us. So,
yes, and I think it's important to highlight the fact that that's important. That doesn't often show up in the news or whatever, but it's good to see that staff is looking to try to mitigate some of those costs and use the alternative methods of sourcing. Until we can, replenish our fleet. Thank you.
The other end of that, though, Councilor Christian, is that the average age of a bus in Ontario is 6 years.
I understand.
The average age of a bus in Sault Ste. Marie is closer to 12 years, and our
frugal.
maintenance costs are...
We're frugal.
Yeah, we certainly probably have more used buses here than most.
Agreed, and that's the point I was trying to make.
Yeah. Councillor Hilsinger.
Mr. Ver, in the future Sault Ste. Marie section of the budget, there's $300,000 for purchased and contracted services. Could you speak to what, if anything, in particular is designated for that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hirsinger, yes, that line item covers all the contracted and purchased services forecasts for future SSM across the 4 pillars and the 8 action items. So to break that down a little further, we have city promotion and branding items, which would be approximately $50,000. There are some education sector initiatives that we've undertaken with Algoma University and Sioux College, which would be also about $50,000. And then we also have, as part of our work, a number of items related to business case, feasibility studies, and strategy documents. So that, again, would look at some of the items related to environmental initiatives, some Indigenous initiatives, social equity initiatives, excuse me, recreation initiatives at Hiawatha, working with some of the stakeholders there. Also, some of our projects related to smart city initiatives. And I should say some of these are forecast at this time because we do have other partners in the community that would be contributing if these are to proceed, and then we would bring them back to council.
Thank you very much.
Councilor Shoemaker, you had your hand up. I wasn't sure if it was on this. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Ver. In your capital requests, at slide 8 of 22, you have 1.24 million for the transit infrastructure, but then in the priority capital requests, the 2.3 million we're being asked to fund over a certain number of years. There's a $540,000 number, I think it is, specific to transit. Are those two different requests, or is the 540,000 encapsulated within the 1.24 million?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker. Sorry, can you just say where the 540 came from again?
Yeah, just let me find it. It was for a number of things: fare boxes, a supervisor's vehicle.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So yeah, that would be encapsulated in that total amount
Okay.
of the 1.2.
And if my recollection serves me properly, last year, the transit renewal projects that we're undertaking with funding from the provincial and federal government, I think they've committed something like 16 million to our community, if that is my recollection correct on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, correct. That would be over a 10-year plan. So we've built out a forecast roughly about the same amount per year, $1.2 million roughly per year, that would allow us to maximize that funding over the next 8 years, in order to leverage all that money that was committed.
But that money, and perhaps this is to Michelle, the money to leverage the provincial and federal funds is within the budget, is it not? It's within our levy increase, the proposed levy increase?
We need Ms. Shell's mic, please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, that is correct. So the city share has been put in there, and the total expenses that we're looking at for a cost of approximately 4.6 million, is that the one you're referring to, correct?
Yeah, that's.
For the bus shelters, et cetera?
Yes, that's right.
The city share is included in the budget, but at this time, 510, 650 is unfunded.
Right, okay. And this 1.2 million, I'm doing quick math in my head here, but 800,000 of that or 700,000 of that would be in addition to what's currently in the budget?
It was funded through the capital from current, plus the reserve from the bus transit reserve. So part of it we had funded. The 510 is the balance that we need to get our share.
Got you, okay, I got you.
So they were able to cover a large part of it. The part that isn't currently shows in our unfunded.
Got you.
But it's all the same project.
And it's in addition to our regular renewal project over the next 8 years?
Yep, we're trying to take advantage of the federal provincial funds.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Bruni, you had asked to come back to you.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question to Mr. Ver regarding the budget. It says that full-time positions are 89.5 last year, and this year you're requesting, it's going up to 93.5, so 4 extra positions. Just curious, where would those positions be with transit?
We're going to have Mr. Lamming answer that question.
I'm sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, yes, there was actually, from the route optimization project that happened a couple years ago, there was a change in the service hours. We brought to 80,000 hours. Through that, we went from 2 additional routes that went into play. So we actually had to schedule the workers for that time frame. So we were within the service hours, but those workers were not accommodated within last year's budget. And this is correcting the budget for this year to make sure it's accurate moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Before we move on to the next presentation, I had one question. Mr. Lamming, the funds you have to do youth programming, if council was to say choose to phase those in over 2 years, would a portion of them be helpful to you this year? Would you be able to do something with some of the funds if you didn't get all of the funds?
Mr. Mayor, yes, we could look with the recreation and culture area to see what we could do with any amount that's possible. Just would impact the hours of operation, the programming that's offered in the space. So that would be the impact of how much we could deliver with how much we're given.
Okay. Okay. Seeing no other questions on this presentation, we'll move on, Madam Clerk, to 4.3.
4.3 is Public Works and Engineering Services.
Okay, very good. Mayor and Council, the Public Works and Engineering budget includes public works, operations, maintenance, along with all related practices under engineering. Added to the responsibilities in engineering is the maintenance of the Civic Center and the Building Department. The OW building, as you're all aware, is in the process of being sold. Here with me today to explain the specifics of each division under Public Works and Engineering budget are the Director of Public Works, Susan Hamilton Beach, and Don Elliott, Director of Engineering. Please allow both speakers to complete their dialogue, after which time we welcome your questions. I would also like to recognize the Public Works and Engineering team with us here tonight in the gallery and thank them publicly for their continued support and hard work. Now I will ask the Director of Public Works to provide an overview of the Works Division, and following that, Director of Engineering will do the same.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce and explain the Public Works Division to you. The administration area provides administration for all those areas under Public Works umbrella, which includes 218 employees. Critically, our dispatch answers and staff respond to approximately 16,000 calls per year. Within this group is also our key staff responsible for the health and safety and training of all of our employees. The operations area. This area includes those management and staff responsible for all roadworks, pothole patching, curb and sidewalk repairs, ditching and catch basin repairs, along with the maintenance of 333 kilometers of sanitary and 227 kilometers of storm pipe. Our parks crews cut approximately 900 acres of grass every 7 days in the growing season. This includes our city parks, sports fields, the hub trail, boulevards, cul-de-sacs, and vacant city-owned land. The Parks Division plant and maintain 140 floral beds, 220 hanging plants, and 114 planters. This area is also responsible for the operation and maintenance of our outdoor rinks, including the skating path in Clark Park. The waste management area. The city owns and operates the landfill site located on 5th Line. Waste collection responsibilities are shared by city forces in the core of the city and by a contractor in the outlying areas. The Household Hazardous Waste Depot is also city-owned and operated at the 5th Line site, and they serve approximately 7,500 visitors per year. All waste diversion efforts, including recycling and leaf and yard waste composting, are managed in this area. The Building and Equipment Division. Public Works has $16 million in buildings and $28 million in equipment. Maintenance and repairs on equipment are managed through a mechanic shop. This area will be undergoing a fleet services review in 2020. The Traffic Division manages approximately 350 kilometers of line painting, in addition to approximately 72,000 meters of intersection line painting and 22,000 signs. The electricians also keep the 80 signalized intersections functioning, which are part of the 525 intersections with some form of traffic control, either signals or signs. Carpentry is also under the traffic area, and they are responsible for activities from manufacturing cabinets to building structures, including concrete and brickwork. A lot of their work will be related to facilities management citywide. I'll turn it over to Don.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. The engineering division, we asked the three engineers, Maggie and Carl and Catherine are there in the gallery. Thank them for their hard work. There's 14 technicians and technologists. These are the folks that basically do all the work in the engineering department. We're primarily responsible for infrastructure and asset management and wastewater treatment operations. We provide construction, design, contract administration for capital infrastructure. There's usually $20 to $30 million annually, spread out over about 15 contracts or so for roads, sanitary sewers, storm sewers, bridges, aqueducts. We procure professional services, grant funding applications, technical services or surveying, drafting, design, traffic data collection, material and CCTV sewer inspection, GIS and asset management services. The building division, Fred Posabon wasn't able to be here tonight. He's responsible for all matters related to the city's duties under the Ontario Building Code, plans examination, issuing permits and building inspections, property standards and yard maintenance, bylaw enforcement. And then the other division here is building services under Roger Caron, and he's responsible for property maintenance, capital upgrades, security caretaking, and janitorial services at the Civic Center. And I believe pass the microphone over to Larry.
Very good. In 2019, we completed the following: advanced turn signals and activation at GNR, third line, and Old Garden River Road, second line. PXO crossings at Queen, Churchill, Wellington, Boydell, McNabb, and St. George's. The Bellevue Park splash pad was successfully completed. Online permit inspections has been launched and running very well, this coming from the building division. Bylaw enforcement task force has met twice and is beginning to assemble recommendations for council. The waste collection cart program was launched in the summer of 2019. We're very pleased with the results so far. This next slide represents the entire department changes. However, this will be detailed for each division in the upcoming slides. It's very difficult to review line items by way of this summary. I'll ask both directors to review their respective areas and provide dialogue explaining the changes. Susan.
The increase in revenue of just over 14% is due to an increase of $300,000 to the revenue budget for landfill fees, bringing the total budgeted amount up to $1.3 million. The landfill revenue is an area closely monitored, with 5-year averages considered here. Contaminated soil revenue and the financial decisions within the business and implementation plan have also been incorporated in this value. As the B&I is in its first year of implementation, this area will continue to be closely monitored. The sewage sludge budget has also been increased by $70,000 due to the approved tipping fee increase presented in the landfill B&I plan. Salaries and benefits. The changes in salaries and benefits for 2020 of the 2.85% reflect an increase in the departmental wages due to the contractual changes for 2019 and 2020. The other expenses, an increase of 5.47 in other expenses covers public works, equipment reserve increase of the $250,000, contractual increases for line painting, approximately $70,000, fuel and utility increases based on usage and estimated rate changes, and CPI increases for granular materials and the repair parts account. Under waste management, there has been an increase in the annual reserve transfer of approximately $228,000, as is indicated in the B&I plan. The 2020 budget for public works results in an overall increase of 2.96% from 2019.
Mr. Mayor and Council, the next slide is the operating budget for the engineering department. There's really no substantive changes over last year. It's a couple of comments. The revenue stream is primarily building permit fees. Other expenses tends to be fairly high. That's where you have the wastewater treatment plant operations, streetlights, and hydrants. The overall effect on the levy this year in the engineering department is 1.63%. Over to Larry.
Mayor and Council, during the 2019 budget deliberations, I brought the idea of having an apprenticeship program forward and asked for support from Council with no monetary commitment. Council provided that support. This allowed staff the opportunity to prepare the dialogue required related to an apprenticeship program for submission at the negotiating table with both PW3 and CSD3. The collective agreements have since been ratified, leaving me the opportunity to now ask for the monetary support required to move forward with hiring apprentices. The cost per tradesperson is approximately $75,000. Therefore, if the full amount is not palatable, perhaps Council will consider allowing the hiring of apprentices over more than 1 year, reducing the financial burden on the levy for 2020, while committing to support the 3 apprentices in multiple years. Allowing PW to move on this program supports the growing need for training our local youth to meet the present demand for tradespersons.
Public Works has a second item here for the repair parts budget. The request to increase the repair parts budget is an ask for an area that has been underfunded for a number of years. Although additional funds are being dedicated to the capital equipment reserve, the deficit is far greater than the allotment, and therefore the rate of equipment replacement still requires significant repair money be spent annually. We have a 5-year average annual overage in the range of $500,000 to $600,000. The repairs are not optional, as the equipment is required to provide council-approved services, meet the level of service established by corporate policies, and meet minimum maintenance standards. It is anticipated that this overage will continue with the current level of capital investment, although a decreasing trend is anticipated with a progressive increase in this area.
Mr. Mayor, there are 3 requests under supplementary items in engineering. The first one involves engineering traffic advisory services. We find we have considerable expertise in the department, but we need to acquire engineering advisory services for evaluation of intersections and various things that come up. We're asking for $30,000 to assist in this in the long term, so that we can get answers and sort out difficulties at intersections in a much quicker manner. The second one is, this is a repeat of last year's request for another $500,000 in the resurfacing or the miscellaneous construction budget. That budget hasn't been increased. The $1 million in miscellaneous construction hasn't been increased in all the years I've been here. It's becoming ineffective due to declining purchase power. Most of that budget goes to, after we do biennial bridge inspections and environmental assessments, et cetera, most of that budget goes to resurfacing, and we're just not able to do much more anymore. So we're looking for an increase there. The third one is a $30,000 increase for the Civic Center budget. The building is well over 40 years old. We have capital improvements that need to be looked after. And right now, we're using our maintenance account for those capital improvements, so we're asking for a $30,000 increase there. Capital requests, Susan?
Public Works' first item here is traffic control system. This traffic control system will enhance our current capabilities and enable the traffic system to respond to changes in volumes automatically. This will begin by focusing on our major corridors. IT has recently installed the first part of the system, but the funds we're requesting here are required to purchase a new dedicated server and establish the communication in the field via a dedicated radio communication system. The second item here for Public Works, we're looking to replace traffic control cabinets. There are currently 54 cabinets that are quite beyond their service life. The majority of these are in the range of 23 to 25 years old. These cabinets are those that sit out in the field. And our last request there is the Bay Street Capital Project has not included traffic cameras for the affected intersections. If not installed, the traffic signals will have to be pre-timed and not automated due to traffic conditions that the cameras can in fact recognize.
On the next slide, Mr. Mayor, 2 capital requests under engineering. The repair of the waterfront boardwalk is due because of the high water levels that we've experienced. We've had significant failure and potential more failure along there. Right now, it's unfunded. And the big one there, as usual, is the 2020 capital roads budget. We brought a report earlier this year summarizing what we wanted to do there. The purpose of that capital roads program, of course, is for reconstruction of existing linear infrastructure. That's roads, storm sewers, sidewalks, street lighting, traffic signals, and related surface works, aqueducts, culverts, and bridges. And without an increase in this budget, there's no foreseeable way of keeping pace with the infrastructure deficit that continues to mount. We believe road surfaces, substructures, and underground services will further deteriorate and fail. Sanitary sewer costs here are covered under the sanitary sewer budget, sanitary sewer revenue that we see on our PUC bills. Storm sewers are funded under an urban-only levy, and I'll draw Council's attention. We are right now continuing to work on the stormwater fee study, which may bring a different model of funding to the table. Larry?
Okay, very good. In closing, Council, Public Works and Engineering makes every effort to accomplish our work efficiently, and we are continually making changes and improvements to the many services we deliver. We have been challenged this past year with the record snowfall and the mid-September storm, which created a new set of difficulties, having to switch from our summer programs to restoration due to damage caused by the storm event. That being said, we've now shifted our winter maintenance program and that will be our focus for the next 6 months. I would like to thank this council, as you've been very supportive of Public Works and Engineering team, and we look forward to continuing to provide the level of service the residents of Sault Ste. Marie have become accustomed to. Thank you for allowing the Public Works and Engineering team to say our piece with regards to budget, and we welcome questions.
Thank you very much, Larry. And we are starting with Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Before I go into my question, I want to say and echo, thank you to your staff, to the managers for coming tonight. It's always a pleasure to have you here so we can say thank you directly. So thank you for taking time away from your family to be here tonight. My first question is going to be going towards Shelley Shield. Shelley, just earlier in the report you mentioned about in the future there's going to be significant higher infrastructure renewal requirements, I believe, that requires funding. And it's my understanding that I think in December 13, 2017, the province approved O.Reg 588117 asset management planning, and that not too far down the road, we're going to have to take in consideration roads, bridges, culverts, water and waste management, and so forth. Correct me if I'm wrong, but is it true that the government will be coming back to us in 2021 and asking us what our plan is for our core infrastructure?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. Yes, there is regulations for our asset management plans. The first part you saw in the early part of this year, where we had an asset management policy that was put to council for approval. It sets out the responsibilities and requirements of each. The next phase is in 2021, where all of the core infrastructure assets are required to be tied into service levels. As well, there'll be different metrics that we'll have to report on as well. At this time, we also will be updating our asset management plan and returning back to council as well on infrastructure deficits, et cetera.
Okay. And just continuing on with you, it's our understanding that it's very difficult for right now to say how much money we're going to be looking at, but it's really not that far down the road. And it's my understanding that the amount of funding we have today and in the future may not be enough to look at these infrastructure problems.
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, that is correct. When we did issue our first asset management plan in 2015, it indicated significant infrastructure deficits, in particular, as Don Elliott has indicated, in the roads area. That has been implemented for many, many years, and that continues to have a shortfall, as well as in some other areas, whether it be in our building infrastructure, whether it be in our fleets, as Susan Hamilton Beach has indicated as well, and we have added $250,000 to help enhance that equipment. So it's in many different areas, and as we go through this enhancement of our asset management plan, we will also be looking at funding options and how we manage it. But the drive right now is to tie in our service levels and make sure our service levels are sustainable in the future with our assets.
Okay, good. I think that's very important for everyone to hear about this again, especially those at home or taxpayers. Our infrastructure is very critical, and it's not just our community, but it's all throughout the province and actually throughout Canada. And going back to Mr. Elliott, just to confirm, Mr. Elliott, you've been with the city for how long in your current position and or in the engineering department?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, I've been at the city since 1997, so in my 23rd year.
And in those 23 years, have you seen a large increase of money going to the roads and these core infrastructures?
Two things, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. There was a $500,000 increase to the base funding in or around 1999 or 2000. what has increased the funding has been the gas tax, the federal gas tax. Those are the two increases that I'm aware of in the capital budget and the miscellaneous construction budget.
Okay, thank you. So the point I'm trying to make is that as we go through our budget, I think we need to put more attention towards the infrastructure, roads, sewers, bridges, and treatment, and so forth, as we continue on our deliberation. I think it's important for us not to miss you, which we've done that in the past. It's very critical because 2021 is not far off. Thank you.
Councillor Christian.
I did not have my hand up, sir.
No, that's great. Councillor Bruni. Nope, I struck you off now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I'll start off with waste management. I guess that's Ms. Hamilton Beach. Regarding the positions, the full-time positions was 16.5 in 2019, and it's gone up to 20, so it's a 3.5 increase. And your salaries are increase of 24.59%, and the benefits are 17. Just if you can please explain.
Through Mr. Mayor to Council Bruni. Yes, that is, Mayor, a shift from staff from our operations area. These are our seasonal workers that work programs such as our leaf and yard waste collection, our HHW that aren't run annually. So it was best deemed that those workers are in fact reflected in the waste management budget. They previously were in our operations, so you will see that drop in our operations budget.
Okay. And also your revenue column, it says you're expecting approximately a 20% increase. Is that because of the additional service charges at the dump?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni. Actually, when we looked at the 5-year averages, largely due to the receipt of contaminated soil, we had a previous reduction, and then now it's in fact reflected as the increase. So again, as noted in my speech or my talk earlier, this will be monitored very carefully, and those 5-year averages reflected here.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Vezo-Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Hamilton Beach. One of my questions was about the increased revenue, because it's always good to talk about something positive rather than complaining about expenses. But you've answered that, so thank you. Parks operations, we have a 172% increase in travel and training. So previous year, the amount was $3,470. And now you're up to $9,470. Can you explain that $6,000 increase? That's on page 170 of the budget. So it's under just parks operations, travel and training.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen. Once again, this is a transfer from some of the training and operations from our operations area over to parks. We actually have a more junior staff there, and in fact, courses in that area were requiring that transfer. So net, it's actually zero, but there is that switch of the funds.
Okay. And of the 25 full-time positions under parks operations, can you explain, because I mean, we're talking about parks, so I'm assuming, what do they do in the wintertime when the parks are full of snow?
Our operations largely are responsible for all of the winter activities with outdoor rinks, and often much of the planning and or planting is in fact starting quite earlier than what one would anticipate.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hamilton Beach. My next question is for Mr. Girardi concerning the apprenticeship program. And thank you, Mr. Girardi, for answering my earlier emails. I appreciate that. So you've listed electrical, carpentry, and HVAC as the 3 categories that you would like to see apprenticeships for. And I certainly do understand the importance of recruitment for your for Public Works. Can you maybe explain some of the hardships that you have with recruitment in terms of specialty trades for the city?
Certainly, through Mr. Mayor to Councilor Vezel. First of all, let me say that I would like to see apprentices in every area, but these are the 3 targeted areas that have a very small pool. So it's very difficult for me to just take someone else and slip them through an apprenticeship program because there's a small pool to draw from. So there's only, like in HVAC, we have 1. We're looking to try and put a second person in there. In our carpentry, it's a small pool also. So our hardships are like everybody else's hardships right now. We have 25 tradespeople that work for the city of Sault Ste. Marie. And I've made this comment on more than one time that these tradespersons haven't been trained within our city corporation. So I believe it's time that we trained our own and built from within, because it is becoming more and more difficult to pull trades people. It's being more difficult to find people even to operate equipment these days. So you'll see a lot more happening in our training area, mainly because we're training people who weren't traditionally in an area of working with equipment or operating within a trade.
And have you looked for alternative sources to help support apprentices, especially in terms of possibly specialized equipment? Have you turned to the college for any type of support that they can offer?
Absolutely. I've been involved with the Ministry of Colleges and Education with regards to apprenticeship programs for probably my whole career. It's been up and down in the funding rate now, and I don't have the funding to date what's available, but through the years, the funding options that you had were, at one time, they supplemented the wages. Right now, I don't believe that's in place. Then they supplemented tools for a while, and I think that may still be in place. But for the most part, you have to train and support those apprentices on your own. And that's why we're initiating the program.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Girardi. My last question is for Mr. Elliott in terms of the environmental cleanup budget, which has doubled for 2020. It was $10,000 in 2019, and we're up to $20,000 in 2020. Could you just explain, Mr. Elliott, the reasoning for the increased budget, please?
Mr. Mayor to Councilor Vezel, and when there's an environmental spill on a road, we're usually the ones that have to go and clean it up, and sometimes we can't find the offender, and so it ends up being a city cost. We implemented we got approval for a $10,000 budget several years ago. Most years it's not efficient or not sufficient to cover what we need to do. So we found $10,000 in my operating budget and just transferred it over. So you'll see a corresponding decrease elsewhere.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Hamilton Beach. This is in regards to the summary presentation that you gave us. I'm looking at page 9 of 11, capital requests number 6 and number 7. Just kind of looking at them, they would seem to me that they may be related in some way. If we went ahead with number 6, would we have to do the replacement of some of the traffic control cabinets by virtue of the upgrade, or are these, doesn't matter, they're entirely unrelated and I'm just linking them?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Scott. Although all working on our traffic system, they are unrelated. We're looking at hardware and software to have a master control system, if I may describe it as opposed to the actual control cabinets, again, out in the field that would house all of the main intersection.
Okay, so the cabinets don't impact what can go in them. They're just a cabinet that holds whatever hardware, software that we put in, kind of thing?
For each particular intersection.
Okay.
Yes.
That was everything. Thank you.
Councillor Hilsinger.
To Mr. Elliott and or Mr. McConnell, my questions are around our active transportation infrastructure. Unfortunately, these improvements that we plan to make this year are not highlighted in the budget, and I want to make sure that I understand what we're planning to do and that people at home understand what is not necessarily obvious here. Could you confirm in the capital roads budget what I believe the Northern Avenue project, and is there another one, but please clarify for me, will include improvements to active transportation infrastructure?
Mr. Mayor to Councillor Hilsinger, yeah, Northern Avenue is very much an active transportation project that's included in the capital budget. It's a conversion to 3 lanes from 4 with cycling lanes on both at curbside. We're extending the sidewalk. There's no sidewalk on the south side of Northern Avenue, east of, or probably west of Sackville, I believe it is. That sidewalk will be placed there. And considering, if the budget permits, we're considering things like pedestrian crossover at Sioux College. So there are several, in that project alone, there's several active transportation items.
And is that the only thing within the capital roads budget?
Well, clearly, in the 2 or 3 roads that we're doing that are, we're replacing sidewalks, of course, where we're reconstructing roads. So there's some active transportation items there as well. I know Director McConnell and I had a discussion about this, and he may have a couple other things on his list that are slipping my mind right now, if I can pass the mic to him.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Councillor Hilsinger, last year council agreed to look at placing bike lanes on 9 different roads. This past summer, council agreed to bike lanes on 4 roads. Over the next few months, we'll be coming back and holding public open houses on the other 5 roads. That is already funded from the Ontario Municipal Computer Cycling Program, which was a $725,000 grant that the city received. And the plan is to go ahead with at least the 4 and hopefully the other 5 roads this summer. So that would create that would be a significant improvement to the city's on-road cycling facilities. In addition, we did extend the hub trail through to the machine shop property, and depending on provincial funding availability, we may be extending the hub trail. As council is aware, as part of the Bay Street reconstruction, the hub trail is being extended along the south side of Bay Street from East Street all the way down to Bella. And as I started to say, dependent on provincial funding availability on that, we may be able to extend that as far as Huron Street and sort of close the loop with the waterfront walkway. And we do plan on doing all of that this coming summer.
Thank you. So just for clarification, there's about $725,000 that you don't see in this budget, but that will be invested in our community and active transportation infrastructure in 2020. Just one other quick question. I understand that there was a motion that myself and I believe it was Councillor Shoemaker had put forward with regards to complete streets in the Willow Street area. And I understand that there will be a report on those questions coming back in the first quarter of 2020. And I thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Ms. Hamilton Beach. There is, well, at various points throughout the budget, but specifically on page 13 to 375 of the preliminary budget, an increase shown of $237,700 in the landfill for the implementation plan. This was a report from October 22nd of this year. So I went back and read that report this weekend, and am I correct in my reading of that report that the proposal is that this year there will be $237,000 added to the budget, and then next year $350,000 added to the budget?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, you are correct in that understanding.
And there were a multitude of scenarios in that report, one of which was to rather than increase the budget so extensively, to rely more heavily on the user fee of the tipping, the gate tipping fee. Or I'm not sure if I've got that word correct, but it wasn't being recommended. But I mean, would it not extend the lifespan of the landfill? If, you know, I think that the comment was that if we increase the tipping fee too much, we'd lose some of the tonnage that comes into the landfills. But would that not in turn extend the life cycle?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, it is in fact the obligation of our municipality to provide that landfill service for our residential sector largely. And so in just doing that, we are in the position that we find ourselves in. Our commercial sector has been reported to you on numerous occasions has dwindled significantly, largely because we're a border community and there are alternative, more feasible means. So to have that very intricate balance between, of course, being financially responsible and yet being cost effective and having some customers, it was certainly the sixth scenario that was deemed to be most appropriate to recommend to council to follow. So at the meeting of the October 22nd meeting of council, that was supported. And so it's those recommendations that were included here today.
Right. And so I guess, and I think I made this comment to the CAO at the time, I would have preferred for all this to come to budget rather than making separate decisions at 3 meetings ago and now it impacting our budget. Nevertheless, here we are. The 237, I mean, if the 237 was some other number, whatever it was, I guess what you're telling me is that all that would do is result in next year, the 350 being 450 or some other number, right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker. Yes, the seventh scenario, which largely placed the onus on fee-based waste, I think in fact showed how unreasonable it is to collect and to financially cover the landfill fees in those fee bases. The tonnages coming from true customers is again dwindling. So the tipping fee in that proposal went from $80 in the 2020 budget, or for the 2020 year, through to $321 per ton by the year 2030. And I don't believe it's reasonable that any of us would think that that would in fact be achievable. So it was the levy increase, again, being that the majority of the waste coming to our site is in fact from the residential sector, municipal operations, the sludge, and that's in fact what we are operating and maintaining.
So is there not some middle ground that can be found between the increase in the tipping fee and the increase in the amount that goes on the levy? I mean, I hear what you're saying, that it's an obligation we have, but I think of other departments that we've got, like your colleague's department, the building division, where there was a fairly steep hike in permit fees a number of years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and the comment that I made at the time was, can we not phase this in over a certain period of time? But the comment I got back from Ms. Schell and from others at the time was that it would be unfair to have the levy subsidize a user fee in essence. And so, are we striking the right balance here? Is there a different way we can increase the tipping fee, which would, not to the point that you were talking of the $330 or whatever it is per ton, but to increase it slightly so that this number of 237 that comes down slightly.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker. The scenario that we are going with will absolutely see fee increases. So we saw a slight moderate increase this year, and that will continue to be affected. The increase in most recent years to the levy for waste management has been in the ballpark of $600,000. And I may ask the CFO to confirm that. So this was actually taking a clear look at a longer term picture and really assessing what we needed to have that value at. And that was, in fact, all the facts presented there. So.
The report from October 22nd said something along the lines of, and I don't have it open in front of me, but something along the lines of, we'll review the tipping fee once every 5 years, if I'm correct. So I guess, is it that there will be a review of the tipping fee every year? Because I think that's probably the more responsible way to do it, to make sure that any amount going on the levy is as low as it can.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Shoemaker, I believe the percentage was deemed each 5 year in 5 year increments to be increased. Again, just going by customers being familiar with the site and the gate fee and the very logistics of increasing a fee on an annual basis, we can do that. So council, if council chooses, as our user fees are presented each year. The plan would look at that increase, I believe, on 5-year increments.
Okay. Those are all my questions.
Councilor Gardy?
Asked and answered, so we're okay.
Councilor Dufour?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is for Mr. Elliott, just about the supplementary request for traffic engineering advisory services. Mr. Elliott, where are some of these services currently funded from?
Mr. Mayor to Councilor Dufour, in the past, they've been funded through public works operation budgets. And the traffic engineering was transferred down to the engineering department, so we have that discipline now. And I think it's fair to say that there always should have been a line item for that. And I presume Public Works just used money they could find somewhere to pay for these studies.
How do maybe other municipalities or some of our comparator municipalities fund this type of line item, or does this line item exist in other places?
Mr. Mayor to Councilor Dufour, I'm not sure if it exists in other centers. It may be a typical engineering budget or under a capital budget. This would be a line item under our, probably under a maybe miscellaneous construction budget that we would use from time to time for these services. Other municipalities actually have more expertise in-house. I know Sudbury has considerable traffic expertise.
Okay, so some of these speed timing reviews, speed studies, things like that would be coming out of the miscellaneous construction budget that we just previously heard hasn't been increased in a number of years?
Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Dufour, I haven't had this conversation with the CFO, but if there's an increase in $30,000 this evening, then perhaps that might be the best place to put it. Engineering or the miscellaneous construction budget would be $1,030,000.
Okay, and if this is approved, would this be something that we could look at RFPing for to perhaps get a lower price?
Oh, yeah, Mr. Mayor to Councilor Dufour, yes, that's exactly what we would do. We would use the procurement policy to retain an engineering firm with traffic expertise for a period of maybe 3 to 5 years, and they would be familiar with our, it'd be a bit of an extension to the engineering department. We would call them on short notice if they have this contract. They would give us a price for that particular intersection, and we'd go from there.
Okay, and would it be reasonable to foresee that, if approved, that this might also be able to maybe speed up certain councilor resolutions that do come to the table concerning, streets where excessive speed might be a problem or where other studies or attention might be needed towards certain intersections?
Mr. Mayor to Councilor Dufour, yes, we would be able to turn those kind of questions around much faster than we can today.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilor Christian, you couldn't leave well enough alone. You're back.
I was going to say, you sounded very disappointed the first time around, so I thought I'd give you a question. In all seriousness, Mr. Girardi had mentioned something and it made me think about the issue, and I wanted to raise it in council. Mr. Girardi, you talked about the struggles with the apprenticeship programs and some of the struggles with keeping staff, et cetera, in the past. How many winter operators do you currently employ? Winter operators, sidewalk, street plows, et cetera.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, operators alone is 106.
How many would you say how many are new in the last 18 months? What I'm getting at is turnover and the struggles you have with salaries, et cetera.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, we might have had this conversation before, but say since 2017 to present, out of that 106, we've probably changed in the area of 40 people.
Right. So I'm only raising that question because I think it's important for the public and council to remember that on one hand, we do a good job of maintaining costs, given the environment that's out there. But on the other hand, we're having a hard time competing with the private sector. So I just think it's important to bring that up. I don't want council to lose sight of that, and I certainly want the public to know that. I mean, we need to, one way to drive to get a bang for your buck for the taxpayer is to drive efficiencies, and it's difficult when you have new staff, right? So I just wanted to bring that question forward and have you address it for the public. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that's the extent of the questions. Thank you to the team of Public Works. Madam Clerk, if we could move on.
Under agenda item 4.4, the Legal Department.
So our city solicitor is up next.
I'm going to need my mic. Okay, there you go. Thanks. Good afternoon, members of, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I have with me as well in the body of the chambers, people from the legal department, both POA and our prosecutor and our assistant city solicitor. With respect to legal services overview, we're obviously an internal group that assists, although we do deal with the public as well. But most of our services to internal departments, providing not only administrative type services, also we have the Provincial Offences Court, both the administration of that and court services under this group. And then we have the insurance and risk management. So the types of services, as you'll see, they're broken down there with administration. It's drafting reports, leases, opinions, easements, property type law, legal advice and support to city council and city staff, property acquisitions and sales, preparation of the bylaws, processing of claims and working with adjusters and councils when there's a claim through our insurance program, representing the city and providing advice on lawsuits, representing the city before courts and tribunals, prosecutions on charges on city bylaws and some provincial legislation. And then with our respect to insurance, it's not only ensuring a proper coverage, but also monitoring the claims process and managing the risk. Our risk manager is also taking over that position of representing the city at examinations for discovery and taking that out of the hands of individuals who may not be as adept at representing the city in those cases. So that's a bit of a change to that role. The key initiatives in 2019, as you know, this was almost my first year, and I've asked a lot of this department, and they've risen to the occasion. We've put in a lot of internal changes and some efficiency changes to the department, and it's still a work in progress, but we're getting to that point. With works that we're working in now, but we're also going to hopefully conclude in 2020. We're working to migrate the claims section through Clear Risk. That's in part through the IT department. We've been working closely with them, and we hope to be able to roll that out in 2020. Given that that system seems to be working well, we're looking to maybe streamline the freedom of information requests as well. There are very tight timelines on that, and so once the claims process has been working pretty well, we want to see if we can also have an efficiency there. And we're also working with the Human Resources Department, specifically the Health and Safety Group, in purchasing, looking at our contractor safety program. And how that will work is that we'll have a preferred list of vendors at the end of it, hopefully, that have been vetted through health and safety. And so when people need a preferred contractor or a specific contractor, they'll have a list to go through. There will hopefully be an app associated with that so that it's easy for people in the field to be able to contract one of 5 preferred contractors rather than trying to find a contractor at a last minute. So that will hopefully speed that process up and make sure that we're always dealing with the people that we want to deal with and that have got a good program in place. With the operating budget, there are some changes there. The salary and benefits has gone up. Obviously, we've got a few of the unionized group as well. Other expenses are pretty much the same. You'll see a change of the 22,000. That's an ask through. We have additional property claims, or not claims, but charges. So out of those charges, we've been tracking the having to pull a PIN number on the property, having to pull a corporate search, just the costs associated with those, the costs of summons to witness, process serving, both in the city and outside the city. Those are the numbers that we think will have increased to do that work and that increased work. However, much of that hopefully will come back once we are successful in a conviction and the fine is collected. That will go back to the city. We do have a supplementary request, and that is with the provincial offenses. I think you heard me say this last year as well, or at the beginning of this year, that the province has continually been saying they're going to download the Part 3 charges to the city from the province. We still don't have a specific date that they're looking at that, but we've had 2 unclear emails to us saying that they will start that download, and they'll work with those that are ready to move first, and then they'll proceed. I've also had a reach out from our provincial prosecutor to talk about when she can meet to talk about the downloading process. In that, and we've got the numbers that are in there before about the types of things, what ideally we're doing is Part 3 are more complex. They sometimes involve custody. There are multiple times of attending in court. There's more disclosure obligations. There's higher fines. So we'd like to move the person that we have now as our prosecutor to the Part 3s and then hire for his position, which is more of a junior position with the Part 1s and 2s. There'll also need to be a training process that goes in there. They'll need to have a staff member that's doing nothing but processing and screening those charges and getting the process, dealing with the groups that are laying the charges, so we've got the proper disclosure, getting the due diligence done, and the prosecutors ready for court. It also will be a backup position for, right now we only have the one prosecutor, so if he were to become sick or he tries to take vacation, there is no one to give him backup, so we incur a cost of having to go outside. He has also advised us that he is going to welcome his first child in June. So I expect that he will need he has the right to take some time off, so he may take time off, so that depth will not be there. So that's the ask on the supplemental request.
Okay, so we will start with Councillor Vezo-Allen.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Fields, and thank you very much for the presentation. Just so there's clarity for not just my fellow colleagues, but for people watching, the provincial download is through the Ministry of the Attorney General because we have to adhere to the Provincial Offences Act. Now, can you please describe what some of these Part 3 provincial offenses, some examples so that people have a better understanding of what exactly that would entail?
And maybe what I'll do is ask our prosecutor to speak to that. I can give a few of them, but he would be, will give a better list of them.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bezoal, and essentially Part 3s are more complex in the sense that you're looking at drive without insurance, which have severe consequences to them. Obviously, the insurance industry is out there. Monetary values of that are in the realm of about $5,000, and with repeat offenders, what you'll see is custodial sentences being imposed. So then you're talking about more complex orders in the sense of whether we're able to find these individuals, serving them with Jenkins orders and trying to get them into custody. You're looking a lot at drive under suspension as well. So there are many people out there that are driving that have a suspended driver's license and they're not being nabbed for the first time. Occasionally it's a second, third, or you can see people up to 13 times with these charges. Once again, you're looking at custodial sentence. You're also looking at more complex charges under the Dog Owner Liability Act, where individuals are being potential dog bites and stuff like that, that are cases that are carrying on for sometimes several days, not just those 1 to 2 hour trials that you're seeing with the speeding ticket per se. Definitely these are some examples of more complex matters.
So I think for clarity, I think maybe to the root of the question, the statutes that we're enforcing are provincial statutes, and these are all provincial offenses. They're just a more significant provincial offense.
Exactly, exactly. So my other, just, I wanted some clarity for everyone. My other question would be, are you seeing, because of having the other bylaw officer, that there's an increase to your workload in terms of enforcement, in terms of the Ontario Building Code and what's happening, because we're getting more and more work done in that manner?
That's correct. We did see an increase over the summer with more charges that were laid with the second bylaw enforcement officer. I expect that to continue, given the push that we have with council to clean up these properties. I would expect we'll see more and more of those charges.
And this is going to be an eventual requirement from the Ministry of the Attorney General for us to take over the Part 3s?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councillor Dufour.
My question's been asked and answered. Thank you.
Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Fields. I just have a quick question, maybe for clarification. I seem to recall earlier in the year, we approved something that had to do with the Part 3 provincial offenses. Was that not this position? I couldn't find it in the old agendas, so I was hoping maybe you can give some clarification, because I do remember it.
There was a discussion, but we didn't approve it because we weren't required to do it yet.
Okay.
We didn't want to voluntarily accept the download,
Oh, okay.
in my recollection.
Great. That's everything I needed. Thank you.
That's correct. We did have this ask in January when the budget first came. It was the same ask, but it was not approved at that time.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Bruni. Go ahead.
One question to Ms. Fields. If we don't budget for this new prosecutor, do you have a contingency plan for the summer and beyond?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, the contingency plan would have to be to take any other work from our present prosecutor that he's doing, so that he's maintaining simply prosecution work. It would increase the workload then for other individuals. In terms of conflicts, or if we found out that the workload was such that he couldn't deal with it, or he couldn't be, for example, in Wawa Court and in Sault Ste. Marie Court, we would have to then contract out for the position.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, to Ms. Fields. You mentioned about the downloading, but it's my understanding, reading your report, that no date has been given yet, and we're not sure exactly when this download may happen by the province. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Barrett, to Councillor Hollingsworth, that's correct. The frustration has been that no date has been provided. We've just been told that it is going to happen. In talking to the provincial crown, there is an estimated date that they would like to have it downloaded by the end of April, but I haven't seen anything in writing or haven't been provided anything by the provincial government.
Okay. So it sounds like if we by chance pass on this, there still may be some wiggle room down the road to re-entertain this if we can't afford it this time. Thank you.
Anybody else? Councillor Hilsinger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Ms. Fields, just one clarification. So there's $151,000 in the supplemental ask for 2 people, but there's also an increase from 7 to 8 full-time positions in the regular budget. Do I understand that correctly?
I think that is for the ask, because we haven't increased people at all in this department.
Am I, okay. The information I'm looking at suggests that in the 2019 budget, there were 7 positions. In the 2020 budget, there are 8. And that's a value of about $75,000. And then this 150 is additional. So I'll just leave that with you to clarify. Thank you.
Okay. Madam Clerk.
Under agenda item 4.5, fire services.
Chief. Can we have the chief's mic, please? The fire chief's mic, please. Yep. Okay, Chief. Okay.
It's my pleasure to present to Mayor Provenzano and City Council Fire Services 2020 budget. I'd like to thank the members of the Senior Fire Management Team for their support and commitment to our organization and this budget process. Deputy Chief Stuart Cole, Deputy Chief Paul Milosevic, Assistant Chief Dan Crozier, and Office Supervisor Lisa McMillan. Sault Ste. Marie Fire Service is an external service that provides 24-hour, 7-day-a-week emergency response to the community. Fire Services consists of 5 divisions: administration, operations, where the primary objective is to provide emergency service response to our community. These types of responses are structural fires, medical responses, auto accidents, auto fires, carbon monoxide, and public hazards. Fire prevention and public education follows the Ontario Fire Code and the provincial mandate from the Ontario Fire Marshal, the 3 lines of defense, which are public education, fire safety enforcement, and emergency response. Emergency management, this role coordinates and develops the city's emergency plan, and last but not least, support services. The total staff complement for fire services is 95. There are 89 union staff and 6 non-union staff. Key initiatives in 2019. Following the provincial mandate, our Fire Prevention and Public Education Division developed a program called Project ASAP, which stands for Assisting Seniors Awareness Program. This is a free program that's offered to senior citizens 65 and over. Appointments are made with our public education officer, who schedules a home visit to check smoke alarms, carbon monoxide alarms, and extinguishers. The home visit includes a review of potential fire hazards that may exist in the home, as well as complete a fire escape plan. Any further recommendations for a fire-safe home are provided to the owner before departure. To date, we have visited 49 homes, installed or changed 44 smoke alarms, installed or changed 21 carbon monoxide alarms, and installed 41 batteries for our community senior citizens. The average age of the participants of this program is 82. Our fire suppression staff also participate in fire public education for the community. Annually, our crews deliver the in-service fire safety program. This initiative is conducted while suppression staff are on duty. Crews go door to door and discuss fire safety, offer to test smoke alarms, and provide recommendations to homeowners to create a fire-safe environment in their home. For 2019, there were 2,319 homes visited. Of those homes, there was a 94% compliancy for having a working smoke alarm. To date, in 2019, fire suppression crews have responded to 2,436 alarms. A sample of some alarms are 106 fires, Of those fires, 26 have had an estimated fire loss of over $50,000. As we're all aware, fire services staff responded to 2 very large fires in early January. I want to once again commend fire suppression staff for their extreme efforts to mitigate further damages during those events. We've had 609 medical assists where first aid, CPR, and/or defibrillation may have been provided. 298 carbon monoxide and public hazards, and 115 vehicle collisions or vehicle fires. Fire Services is presenting a 5.12% increase to the 2020 budget. This is not reflective of a one-year increase. It's a result of a 3-year arbitrated award, with the 4th year pending the results of police bargaining. The award captures 2015, 2016, and 2017. When applying the increase to the years related, it represents an annual average increase of 1.7%. Senior Fire Management has worked diligently within our budget to accomplish the goals and objectives to provide sustainable, cost-efficient, yet effective fire service for the City of Sault Ste. Marie. Our revenue increase of $25,000, this is due to the open-air burning permit cycle. A 3-year burning permit was introduced 3 years ago. Those that bought this permit will be renewing in 2020. Other sources of revenue are fire protection services to Batchewana First Nations, the open-air burning permits, fees for fire inspections, fees for fire extinguisher training, and air bottle refills. Salaries and benefits has an increase of $709,000. This is primarily due to the results of the above-mentioned arbitrated award. It also encompasses promotions related to rank for union and non-union staff. As well, contained in the $13.3 million is our overtime budget. Other expenses, we see an increase to our operating budget of only $8,274. This is related to the cost of maintenance, repairs, and utilities and fuel. Fire Services submitted 3 supplemental requests for the operating budget. All 3 requests support the implementation of the Council-approved Fire Master Plan, which is our strategic framework for the delivery of fire protection services for the next 10-year planning horizon. The first 2 requests both work hand in hand to formulate our officer development program. The first request is for comprehensive officer training. This is recommendation number 30 of the Fire Master Plan. It states, develop the current officer training initiatives into a comprehensive officer development program. The officer training is established through the National Fire Protection Association and is administered through the Ontario Fire College. The program has an ongoing cost of $4,000 annually. Our officers attend the college to complete the training and development. The second request complements the first, enhances our officer development program. This supports recommendation number 31 of the Fire Master Plan. It states adoption of the Blue Card Incident Command Training Program. Blue Card has an ongoing Blue Card training has a one-time fee of $40,000 to initiate, and the program has an annual fee of $13,000 to maintain the training. This program is one of the most widely used programs in the fire service. It utilizes both online and in-class simulation training, which focuses on incident command training, structural fires, and all emergency responses. As an employer, municipalities are required to ensure supervisors are trained to oversee the workforce and also ensure the supervisor is competent. These 2 requests will ensure our responsibilities. Consequences of not providing this would be not following our master plan and/or our legislative responsibilities, which are detailed in the Occupational Health and Safety Act. The third request is for a comprehensive technical training program for support services staff. This follows recommendation number 40 of the master plan, adopting the emergency vehicle technician certification for mechanical staff. This carries an ongoing annual cost of $1,000 to maintain this certification. The training will ensure staff are current in mechanical trends and aid staff in maintaining a complement of service-ready apparatus at all times. Consequences of not approving a gap in efficiencies, training, and knowledge within the mechanical division would be created. Each budget cycle, fire service contributes to the fire capital reserves with $303,000. These funds are utilized for apparatus, vehicles, and equipment purchases. For 2020, there are 3 capital request submissions. The first request is for $10,000 for the replacement of 4 automatic external defibrillators. The current AEDs have been in service for over 12 years and have exceeded their life expectancy. These units are utilized when suppression staff respond to medical assist calls in a tiered response with the EMS. Often, these calls require CPR and defibrillation by frontline staff. The AEDs are a vital piece of equipment to perform this service level to our community. If these units are not replaced, there would be a delay in patients receiving defibrillation during CPR until an ambulance arrives with an AED. This delay could have negative results for the patients. Due to the age of these units, service and maintenance are difficult. Fire service follows a capital fleet replacement schedule that outlines the lifespan and replacement schedule for all of our fleet vehicles. The schedule follows industry best practices, National Fire Protection Association 1901, which is the standard for firefighting apparatus, and the Fire Underwriter Survey. The replacement schedule for frontline fire apparatus is 12 to 15 years. The second capital request is for $850,000 to replace our fire tanker truck. The tanker is 1994 and is well past the life expectancy for frontline service. This piece of apparatus carries 2,000 gallons of water and is utilized where water is required outside of the urban service line, or as a supplemental water at structural fires. In winter, there are always a threat of frozen hydrants. This is also a valuable piece of apparatus given our northern climate. Due to the age of this unit, replacement parts are and have been difficult to find. If this unit is not replaced, service and repairs will become difficult or prohibited, and this could result in us not having a fire tanker for responses. Also, the Fire Underwriter Survey, which sets the insurance ratings for all municipalities, could adjust our community's insurance ratings due to not having a fire tanker that meets NFPA Association 1901 standards. This is an overview of the replacement schedule for the required purchase of apparatus. As you can see, there are 5 pieces of large fire apparatus that will be required between 2020 and 2025. So approximately $4.9 million will be required to fund the purchases to follow the replacement schedule. It's important to recognize that the Fire Capital Reserve account at the end of 2020 will have approximately $174,000 remaining, with a transfer of $303,000 in 2021 will give us a starting balance of $470,000. Funding options or debt financing will have to be considered for the remaining purchases. The third capital request is for $12,000 for a firefighter bunker gear dryer. The bunker gear is what firefighters wear while fighting a fire and performing other duties. The dryer is required to expedite the return of service of contaminated firefighter bunker gear. Fire Services was subject to a Ministry of Labor field visit. It was determined that the dry time of the bunker gear is a choke point in the process of returning the gear to service in a timely manner. In the Occupational Health and Safety Act, Section 21 guidance notes, it details the care, maintenance, inspection, and replacement of bunker gear. This purchase will facilitate meeting those guidelines. Fire Services follows a very detailed and prescribed process that has been identified by the Ministry of Labor as a leading process in the province. This process for decontamination and cleaning of our gear is a contributing factor to the prevention of firefighters being exposed to cancer-causing carcinogens and off-gases. It's also a valuable method to mitigate the cost of legislative presumptive cancer claims. That concludes the Fire Services 2020 budget presentation.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. I just want to also recognize, I see some of your members here as well. So thank you for being here tonight and for what you do. Through you, Mayor, to Chief, just for some clarification, please. You mentioned about a replacement of the tanker, I believe. If this was replaced, I believe we have a current tanker that needs, what would you do with the the tanker, would you sell it to another community? Is there a potential to gain some money back and so forth?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, yes, we would definitely put it up for sale and see what value it holds, and then we could apply it towards the purchase of the new tanker.
Okay, so to help reduce that cost. Okay. Just clarify again the bunker gear. You said it was $12,000, and I'm under the impression that the dryer is good enough for everyone's suits. It's all put in right after they come back to the station.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. So the process, we have extractors, washers that wash the gear, and we do have a dryer, but the choke point, because it takes a long time to dry the gear, we need an additional dryer so they can keep up with the gear. Each dryer houses 5 sets of gear at a time. So we'd have the ability to dry up to 10 sets of gear at one time. And then that would expedite the return of that gear to service.
This is interesting. So you're saying that that station is not in service until their gear is all decontaminated and clean to this day?
No, they're in service. They have 2 sets of gear, so they would wear their second set while their other set is being dried. And it's just a continual cycle of maintaining that gear.
Okay, great clarification. So right now, each individual has 2 sets of gear.
Correct.
Okay. Just going to the master plan that you keep referring to. I believe I read in your report that it said senior fire management is following the proposed implementation schedule contained in the FMP, Fire Master Plan. All immediate term operational recommendations, with the exception of item 7 bylaw, so forth, be updated, are complete. So if I'm reading this correctly, are you saying that everything that is absolutely critical has been completed?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, all of the items that were identified in that master plan in the immediate term are complete, other than the E&R bylaw, which we hope to bring back in the first quarter of 2020.
Okay, so it's my understanding that what has also been completed, as an example, is a comprehensive training program for firefighters, replacement of telephone system, and et cetera, et cetera. Is that correct?
Correct.
So all your individuals have gone through a comprehensive training program already?
Yes.
As outlined by the master plan?
Correct.
Okay. Thanks for that clarification. Clarification number 2. You mentioned examples, blue card incident command training, for example, fire comprehensive officer training, as an example, fire technical training as another example, I believe. It's my understanding, reading the report, that we have 12 to 24 months to get these items done, and they're just considerations from the master plan. They're not actually a must, but they're considerations. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, there are recommendations to enhance our ongoing training. So we do have officer training, officer development training currently. These requests are to enhance them and to complement the recommendations through that master plan to create efficiencies for us.
And we have up to 24 months to fulfill this, so 2 years technically.
Yes.
So we could defer this in the 2 years if we need to transfer money elsewhere.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, yes. I just want to point out, though, that that plan was implemented in 2018. So going into 2020, we'd be at the 2-year mark. That's the 24 mark of March of 2020.
Okay, that's a great clarification as well. Thank you for saying that. And last question is that deployment of fire trucks and ambulances. When a call comes in, both the fire truck and the ambulance is deployed at the same time, but obviously from different locations, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, we respond currently out of 4 stations. We respond out of 4 stations. EMS responds out of the 1 location at Old Garden River Road.
Okay, and I believe that there's some talk about, in the budget, about new fire station, is that correct?
Last year, we brought forward a request to proceed with option 3 and the property acquisition to implement that, and it's still ongoing at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hollingsworth was the only person I had on that list. Councillor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to thank Chief Johnson for his hard work and his senior staff administration for guiding us through the Fire Master Plan introduction and also its implementation. And of course, to the fire department, they keep us safe. That's important. Mr. Johnson, Chief Johnson, I'm looking under suppression, and it shows an 8.02% increase in salaries. You pointed out that that's as a result of the 3 years of labor arbitration that got us there, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so that's an 8.02% on the suppression side. But all of those salaries were negotiated rather through the arbitration process and not negotiated at the table.
Yeah, they weren't negotiated, they were awarded.
Right.
Yeah.
Through arbitration.
I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah.
Now, does that also include the 369, whatever we call it, retention clause or award that firefighters get with tenure? Does that include that provision?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, yeah, that budget number reflects the 369 experiential pay, and that also reflects our overtime budget contained in those salaries.
Okay, so as far as overtime goes, how much are we budgeting for overtime this year?
For 2019, our overtime budget is about $650,000.
$650,000. What was it prior to the 24-hour shift? Do you know that number?
I don't have the exact number, but as currently it sits, we have a slight reduction in overtime since we've moved to the 24-hour shift.
So it's actually resulted in a reduction?
Correct.
Okay. So we had a conversation earlier. There's currently right now there's 15 firefighters that earn the 3%, 9 firefighters that earn the 6%, and approximately 22 that earn the 9%, and that's based on tenure. And there are about half the firefighters that are underneath 100,000. How many of those 45 have been hired in the last 2 to 3 years? Do you know offhand?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, in the last year and a half, we've hired 18 firefighters.
Okay.
Through the years of 15 and 16 and 17, we did not hire any firefighters.
Okay. Okay. So, I mean, if you do simple math, that's recognizing that we have platoon chiefs and captains, et cetera, with the 77 suppression, that's approximately 109,000 on average, which includes overtime. I guess the big point, though, and it's to the point that you raised earlier, Mr. Chief Johnson, is that right now, of the $14.2 million budget, $13.36 million is salaries and benefits, which is 94%, which raises some concerns, and I guess I'm concerned when we look at the capital needs over the next several years and how underfunded we are in those reserves. So I appreciate the work you're doing. Very, very important function in our city. But nevertheless, we've got some challenges ahead in that area, I think. Thank you.
Any other comments for, okay, Councillor Nero and then Councillor Vezoala.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief Johnson, regarding the capital request for the bunker gear dryer for $12,000, I take it that fire services has a washer of similar expense as well. Is this something, washing of bunker gear, washing and drying, is it something that we've ever looked at in going to an outside service provider with that service?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, currently, no, we have not looked at that. our staff does everything in-house. So we utilize their salaries while they're on duty to clean their own bunker gear and dry their own bunker gear. It's something we could look at, but I think utilizing staff while they're on duty keeps the cost down.
But certainly, the cost of both the washer and the dryer, the cost of water, the cost of fuel, gas for the dryers themselves, certainly could be compared to outside service provider. I'm not sure if it would be saving in cost, but I do believe it would be something to look at. And I believe there is a service provider locally that would do that. So I'm just throwing that out there.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Nero, they're valid points. My concerns or my questions that I'd have to ask to that is, one, would the third party who washes it meet the requirement that the NFPA requirement for the washing and cleaning of it? There's certain criteria that come with it. And then does our bunker gear contaminate their equipment when they have other people that they have contracts with? But those are things we could look into.
I'm not going to answer for the service provider, but I can tell you from my experience that this is something that can be done by a service provider without affecting anybody else or the machinery that they use. So, but I can't speak for the service provider.
Is that it, Councilor Nero?
That's it.
Councilor Vezo-Allen?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Chief Johnson. You alluded to that the 1994 tanker truck could possibly be sold to recoup some of the costs of purchasing, I'm assuming, a brand-new fire tanker truck for $850,000. Have you looked into possibly a recently used model? Is that something that is available, especially if municipalities are amalgamating or if fire services are amalgamating? Have you looked into if there's any inventory of, say, something that's, 10 years old or 5 years old in terms of purchase?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Vezo-Allen, we do keep our eye on that. When you start looking at a 10-year-old tanker, we have to look at the amount of hours that are on the diesel engine. And I'd hate to be purchasing something. Their replacement is in a 12 to 15-year window. So it's a 10-year purchase would be then close to the end of its life expectancy. We have a set criteria for our specifications that we look for. Our whole fleet is based off of those specs. So for us, in our opinion, to purchase brand new so that it meets the needs long-term for the fire service is what we look for.
Is leasing a possibility, or does it have to be a capital purchase?
I have not seen lease arrangements on the purchase of fire trucks, but it's something that we could inquire about.
And you alluded to that the 94 tanker truck is possibly not up to insurance standards, and it could affect our insurance ratings. Can you be more specific to that statement?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Vezo-Allen. Mainly it's based on the life expectancy of it. They have a ranking and a scoring mechanism for that from the fire underwriter's insurance. It looks at the condition of the vehicle, the amount of hours on the engine, and the actual year that it is, and that is where they come out with their rating for our insurance.
Okay. And just one other question, and it's more understanding calls for service and protocol, just so I can understand staffing hours and costs. If EMS is called, does fire immediately accompany, and vice versa? So if fire is called, does EMS immediately accompany as well?
And through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Vezo-Allen, we have prescribed calls through our agreement. Actually, last council meeting, we brought forward our tiered response agreement where it outlines the details of why and when we would be activated. As far as EMS supporting us, they don't have an automatic call that they come to for us. We request them to respond if we had a working house fire with report of someone trapped or something of that nature. We'd ask them to respond with us.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilor Dufour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Chief Johnson, just had a quick clarifying question about the supplemental requests for training. I believe when you were answering Councillor Hollingsworth's question, you said that this was an enhancement to our current training program. And then just under your last bullet point here, it says that if we don't provide this extra training, that officer development will not be following the FMP to create an efficient and effective response model for the community. Can you just elucidate a little further on what the consequences of not providing that training would be, not providing the enhancement to the training?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Dufour, we would be looking at creating a more efficient model for our training. Also, right now, we're meeting the bare minimum standards, so this would be an enhancement. We do officer training, but we want to get our officers further trained, and I believe that these two requests would provide our officers with more detailed training. They have to make decisions in a split second, and the more repetitive nature of training that they have for that, it makes for better for officer decisions on the scene of emergency.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the chief? Councilor Gardy.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Chief Johnson. I'm just taking a look again at the replacement schedule. Okay, and on it, there are, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The tanker's 94, correct? 1994, you mentioned? Yes. Can you tell me, ballpark, what the other ones, age-wise, are? The rescue unit, aerial, and the other two pumpers?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Gardy, I believe the rescue truck, I'm going off the top of my head here,
Yeah.
but I believe that rescue truck is in the late 90s. The other pumpers are in the 2000s. There was a replacement with we had 3 rescue pumpers that were replaced one year after another, and that's why you're seeing them coming back right now. So if you take the 10 years off that date, one would be like a 2015, a 2014, in that ballpark between 2010 and 2014.
Okay.
Or sorry, 2004,
2004, yeah.
2004, 2005.
How many vehicles in your fleet, period? Whether they be like pickup trucks, little Corollas that you're ripping around in, or these fire suppression vehicles? Ish.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Gardy, I would estimate all encompassing would be about 17, 18 vehicles.
And the ones that are of more of a, not a suppression nature, but the education officers may use, or, some management, are they on like a lease kind of thing? Do you guys lease those vehicles?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Gardy, they're all dated as well, but at the time we bought them outright and we serviced them. We would be looking at replacing those in the near future as well, and I think a lease option would make more sense for us.
So would they all be about 10 years old-ish?
Yes.
They would be. Through you, so, it's going to be a considerable investment over the course of the next number of years to replace suppression and any other vehicles. You talked about 1994, you mentioned 2004, 2005. So just as a reference, I'm going to use 2005. I'm going to ask through you, Chief Johnson, if it was before your time, through you, through Mr. Mayor to you, Mr. Johnson, or for some help from Mr. Nero, over the course of the last 15 years, say 14 years, I'm going towards salaries now. Could you give me an idea of how much the average salary of a firefighter increased over the last 14, 15 years? Because what I'm trying to balance is, we're in desperate need of equipment to make sure that our firefighters are doing what they need for the community and to ensure that they're safe while they're doing it. At the same time, a preponderance of the money that we've been spending over the course of these last 14 or 15 years, I'd argue, is going towards salary. So it's been really difficult, I'm sure, for previous councils to manage. So that's my question. So could you proceed in answering it if you could, either of you?
Bear with me, I thought I had it.
So if I understand it, what's the average wage of a firefighter today compared to an average wage of a firefighter 10 years ago?
12, 14, sure.
Well, you got to give them you can't.
Yeah, 10, sure. I'm
Sure,
okay.
you have
Sure,
to.
you're the chair. Go right ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy. While the chief works out some numbers, I can certainly speak to a trend in the last bit of time where certainly arbitrated awards surpass freely bargained agreements. To the extent that we can get detailed right now, certainly we can gather that information and provide it to council. But certainly, I wouldn't be surprised if they're in the area of the 2% range historically, when freely bargained agreements were something less of that. But certainly, I would be remiss to estimate without knowing the data and having to see the data.
So your answer, at least tentatively right now, is 2% per annum, is what you're saying? So if we go back 10 years, it's 20%, 20-ish percent. Okay.
Well, look, I think there's a couple things here. I think Councillor Christian's made this point. And what do you see? 93% of the fire budget is 94% of the fire budget is labor cost. But when you look at the police service, like the large percentage of the cost of running the police service is police costs.
Right.
And across the province, like the wages for police and fire have outpaced the wages for other municipal services. So that squeezes the remainder of the budget. So the chief is running a fire service with taking out your salary cost, chief. What do you have left to run the fire service?
Mr. Mayor, I have roughly about $1 million to run the fire service. The other point on that you're making is our utilities and fuel is about $250,000, and we transfer the $303,000 to our capital. We operate at about $500,000.
Yeah, but there's a million in there. I mean, you're allocating different places, but on an ongoing basis, $500,000. Generally speaking, you have $1 million run the service. On the police side, you know, it's upwards of $29 million on the whole budget, and over $24 million of that is salaries, and we run the whole police services on less than $4 million. So look, I mean, the trend's there. I mean, we know it's there. The reality is we either have to, we're going to have a continued pressure on how to run these services because they're not inexpensive to run, and the vehicles and the attendant costs of them are going up. So the reality is either we increase what we have to run them, or we are able to operate in the envelopes we currently have. And the only way we can operate in the envelopes we currently have is if we do that in conjunction with the bargaining units. And we work with them to operate within those envelopes. And that's what we have to try and do. And I think that's what the chief is certainly going to try and do in fire. And that's what the chief up in police is going to try and do. But at some point, the reality is that these costs are outpacing our revenue growth and our ability to pay for them. And if we don't deal with that as a one-team approach and do it all together, decisions at some point will have to be made that will be difficult for people to make.
You know what, and I just highlight that as an example, and because I think it's vital that the public appreciate the challenge that we're facing, you know, across the corporation. And, you know, compliments to the chief and to everybody and all the departments that came back with what I think was a very responsible budget. That being said, there are these very, you know, very serious pressures that we're all going to be facing over the course of the next few years, several years, and that list from the fire chief in terms of equipment that they require is evidence of that. So that's all I wanted to mention that for. Thank you.
Anything else for the chief? Councillor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for indulging me. And to the point you made, I mean, I think what you're saying keeps the rest of the budget conversation in context. The fact is that a lot of the increases we see, not all of them, but a majority of them are from things that are difficult for council to control, right? I mean, police services operates its own board. Most of the settlements we have with fire are done through the award process. And that's fine. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that these services aren't worth them. I'm saying quite the opposite. They are important. But I think in the context of discussing budgets and taxes, people in the public need to decide if they too feel that way and accept that it's always going to be a struggle bringing the levy down, given that we need these services, they're important, and we're struggling within that environment. That's all.
Yeah, I think it has to be recognized that all of our emergency services are very important.
Yep.
And they're essential services, and we have to make sure they're serviced properly. We have to make sure the staffing levels are proper, We have to make sure that our employees that are employed in those services are properly trained and have the proper resources to do their jobs properly, because their jobs are difficult jobs and they're dangerous jobs. We, like many other municipalities, are faced with the challenge of determining and figuring out how to afford those services at the same time as keeping the cost to our ratepayers affordable.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's our challenge. And frankly, it'll be easier to meet if we're able to do it in conjunction with our management and our employees than if we try and do it in a different way. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Yeah, just quickly, and to add on that, we have been very open to understanding the master plan. And if I may say, as council today and council of the past, we have been very concerned that we're making all the recommendations on the master plan, and we want to continue forward with that. But I think the mayor and my two council mates have made some good points with regards to the salary and so forth. But we want to make sure this community is safe, and we want to make sure that we're all working in a partnership. And so, again, that's what I was asking you about. Did we come across and answer all the critical pieces of the master plan? And the answer, it sounds like it was yes.
Okay, so I think we can move on from this, council, and we're moving on to 4.6, which is capital budget deliberation. So I think as we start this discussion, is it the treasurer, or are we putting so we'll have any comments or motions or ideas that relate to not the supplementary list, just the capital budget. I don't expect there's going to be much deliberation on the capital budget unless there's things that are in the current capital budget that you're looking to maybe discuss or remove from them. But this will be the chance to talk about the capital budget. If anybody has anything that is currently in our capital budget that you're looking to discuss or table or remove, we can have that discussion now. Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just trying to find my copy of the capital budget that I was working from. Yes, okay. So are we just looking at the capital prioritization projects that were listed in 17 and 18 of the preliminary budget, Ms. Schell? Are we just looking at it looks like it's the 2.301 million worth of capital projects right now? Is that what you've got?
Yes.
Okay. So I would move to remove the traffic boxes, the cabinets, the traffic control cabinets.
Okay, so what item are we dealing with there, Councillor Shoemaker?
$89,250, number 7.
Number 7. Is that's unfunded?
Correct.
Okay, so it is, now just for the clarity for the rest of council, do you want to speak to that, Mr. CEO or Mr. Girardi? What those traffic control cabinets are the ones that we need for which project, Mr. Girardi?
Through Mr. Mayor to council, those are the cabinets that are used throughout the city. Those are the cabinets that are better than 20 years old that need to be replaced. So the cabinets are replaced and used for traffic control in each corner.
Okay, so that's all of that's a major replacement across the city.
Yes, this isn't the full cost. We've been going year after year to try and get funding to replace them.
Okay.
This would replace approximately 3 cabinets.
Gotcha. Okay, so Councillor Shoemaker's putting that suggestion forward. Is there any discussion on it? If there are no questions about it, I just want to show of hands to see who would be supportive of that. Okay, so I don't know, Councillor Christian isn't in the room, but it doesn't look like that would carry. In any event, Councillor Shoemaker, if you did want to, when we get out of Committee of the Whole, if you did want to specifically move that, you could. Okay. Generally speaking, we're kind of just keeping track of the things that will carry out a Committee of the Whole, but I'm not going to prevent you from moving that in any event, but it doesn't look like it has support right now.
Okay. I've got more.
Okay, go ahead.
The 126 for the Bay Street cameras, I don't see it on there. Oh yeah, there it is, 126,500. So I do have reasons on this one. The signal signalization timing of Bay Street, because it's a one-way street, should be pretty straightforward. I don't think that the traffic cameras are required to adjust to if cross-traffic comes. The timing of the signalization should be timed to traffic traveling down Bay Street, and it's a one-way street, so it should be pretty easy. So I think the requirement for cameras is redundant.
Okay, so any questions for our staff on that item? Go ahead, Councilor Hilsinger.
Can the traffic cameras be installed at a different time when perhaps funds were available? Is there a certain efficiency to doing them now versus in the future?
Mayor, to Councillor Hilsinger, the reason why you put the cameras in is when you construct the road in the past, you put loops at every intersection, and that's what activates the lights so that traffic would move along at a more reasonable pace. By putting the cameras in, you're moving that infrastructure from the ground to on top of the poles. So you can put them in at a later date, absolutely, but we most probably would come into the same problem where it would get deferred. So I would certainly suggest that we put the cameras in now.
So on that point though, you're not putting the loops in now?
No loops.
No.
There are no loops in it.
There are no loops.
So
This is
without
all
it,
gonna
you
be-
can't
It's going to be
operate.
synchronized
That's
to
right.
Councilor Shoemaker's point. So if we choose, there's no added expense if we forego it now, I think is the question. If they were to forego it now and decide to do it in a year or two, would there be an added expense to that?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
He said no. Councilor Nero, on the same point?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, yes, on the same point being all the projects total. Can we have Ms. Shell address the option that we're looking at to?
No, I want to.
Well, we're starting to see which ones we want to take out and leave. Why don't we just see how we're going to finance the whole thing if we want the whole thing to go?
Well, sure, you have that. You have that knowledge already. You have that information how you'd finance
We have
it.
that 5 years, 460,
Yeah.
160,000
Yeah.
capital from current.
I mean, and if you're comfortable with that, presumably you wouldn't agree with taking things out, but if you're trying to get that number down, you might agree with taking it out, but what?
Okay. But I wanted one question before I start looking at taking things out. You gave us a letter from PUC this evening.
Okay, so I can address that.
So can we talk about 460 versus the 400 from PUC?
So what I was going to propose, and I was going to propose this when we got to supplemental and we talked about financing it. So we have the 400 from the PUC, and the payment over the financing period is 460 a year. So what I thought we could do this year is move to apply the entire 400 to that cost, which would reduce our need to increase the levy this year, but therein there creates a hole, right? So we would need that 460 for next year. So what I was going to propose is that we would increase it to some degree council's comfortable with this year, and then so that we didn't have to catch up the whole 400 next year. So let's say if you had increased capital to current by 200,000 this year, you'd apply this 400, right, to the cost, and then you'd have a $200,000 increase, which would also be applied to that cost. So on a going forward basis, next year and the years after to pay it off, it would be a lesser amount. It would actually be less than 400. So next year, you'd only have to apply maybe another $180,000 increase to cover the rest of the debt for the remainder of the term. So it's a way to get most of this stuff in without actually increasing the levy this year by $460,000. The increase to the levy would be more modest than that, but in any event, it's money you're still spending. Yes.
Yeah, these are all one-time projects, correct?
Yes.
These are all one-time. The 460 is ongoing.
For 5
For 5
years.
years. If we use the 400,000, we get the benefit this year. Next year, we have to make some of that up.
That's right.
Explain. Yeah, so going forward, if we look at this, where else would we utilize the 400,000 if we didn't use it for something like this?
On one-time spending.
A one-time
You
spend.
you can't put the 400,000 somewhere where it
Where it's going
is.
to be on the operational budget.
We don't know if we're gonna get it again, so we'd have to pick a project that's a one-time fund and spend it there.
Right, so I just wanted to get that out before we started pulling things away, start thinking about going with that option. So that's why I wanted to bring it
I don't think we'd prevented, I don't think we would be prevented from going with that option. It would just decrease the amount that we'd have to borrow internally if council didn't feel like some of these things were priorities.
Well, I guess the point, Mr. Mayor, is if we don't find out from council if they're willing to go that way, what's the use of going item to item? If everybody's in agreement that we should
So
just finance it.
does council like that proposal?
Yes.
Can I have a show of hands on that proposal? Okay, so, but there's a second part we'd have to clarify, and council will want, the staff will want this direction. So we're telling them to apply the full 400 to the outstanding unfunded capital amount, right? What amount are we willing to put in the levy this year so that next year we don't jump it up by 460? Councilor Dufour?
Half of what was proposed?
So
230,000?
Okay, so that would be agreeable to me. So that would be, instead of a $460,000 increase to the levy, it would be a $230,000 increase to the levy. And then next year, we would top up the remainder, and then we would pay off the debt for the 4 years after that. And I actually think, I personally believe next year's increase from where we're at this year to the final amount will be less, because we have the 230 that we're adding this year, right? So there'll be the 400 plus the 230, that will go to that, so there'll be a less amortized amount. Okay, so now we've taken a bit off what will ultimately be what we thought would be a levy increase. Thank you for that. We can get back to, now that you all know that, we can get back to whether you want to pull any of these things out, which is still a relevant discussion. So to Councilor Shoemaker's point, he's suggesting that we, in his opinion, don't need that infrastructure on Bay Street to put cameras up. Do you have any more questions about that, Councilor Dufour?
Yeah, if, Mr. Girardi, could you just speak to maybe the driving experience difference between having the cameras and not having the cameras? Like, would we be unable to kind of change traffic patterns for large events? Give us an idea of what would change between having them versus not in terms of user experience?
Through Mr. Mayor, to the councillor, I couldn't give you the specifics on it because I'm certainly not the traffic expert. But I can tell you that as you would come to an intersection that has loops in the ground, it activates the lighting so that you can move traffic along. If you were sitting there and you didn't have the loops on, it would have to wait for whatever the timing was set at that traffic light. So it can't activate it in advance. It has to wait for the set timing. We also, I should also say, we also use these cameras so that these cameras are tied into a main system, and that's why we're trying to get that server, so that we can readjust things for events and for traffic. Right now, everything is an individual. Picture it all as individual items out there. We're trying to tie these together because this has been a request from council probably for the last 8 to 10 years, and we have to do it manually. So these are the options that get us down that road and allow us to be able to do some of these modifications through a laptop as opposed to going to the site.
Thank you.
And I think to Councilor Nero's point, reducing it might reduce the payback time, but you're not reducing the impact on the levy. Okay, so show of hands, straw poll, who is supportive of taking that item out? Councilor Shoemaker, it's item 9. So that looks like it'll carry. So we'll have to pull that out, and we'll do that in open. Okay. Anything else on the unfunded? Well, not the unfunded. Anything else in the capital funding list? No, just capital deliberations. So anything on the capital that you wanted, Councilor.
Supplementary.
Yeah, we're going to do supplementary
Okay.
after this.
Yeah, no, on the capital, that was all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Anything else on capital? Councilor Hollingsworth.
Just for clarification, what's up on the screen versus what I see on my computer might be a little different. The transit shelters, is that under the supplementary?
I believe it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's within the 4.5, and that's also the funds that we've applied for provincially and federally.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, anything else on capital? So we have one item coming out of capital. So we can turn to operating budget deliberations. Do we have a slide for that, staff? Okay. So we should move to supplementary then, I think, Mr. CEO. That'll essentially affect this. There's nothing to move in and out of that. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor and Council, perhaps the CFO can just note the adjustments that have been made to access the tabling of the preliminary budget, just so that everybody's clear.
Do you want to go through that then? Okay. Can I have thank you.
Through Mr. Mayor to Council, there has been a couple adjustments to the preliminary budget that you received on November 18th. So far, we have increased the Algoma Public Health levy increase based on the information that we received, and I think Council received that memo. We estimate that they will utilize the full 10% increase that they're allowed, so that's an additional to the local and levy boards of $193,438. There was a resolution recently for parking enforcement, a contractual increase of $15,000. The sale of the Ontario Works Building, there was a resolution for that, and that is an increase of $128,513 due to lost rental income. There was also an error that we caught in the budget, and we've increased the payment in lieu by $116,644. There was also a resolution received after the user fees with the new fire user fee, and so we show $1,525 in additional fees. Conservation Authority also notified us after the preliminary that they will not be requesting a capital portion of their levy, so that's a reduction in the levy boards of $58,000. And then there's another resolution with the gym club. That was at the last meeting, and it ended up with $7,608. So that brings us down to 1.04 for the city budget and 2.16 for the levies and local boards. And that's our starting point.
Okay, so our starting point is 1.04 for the city, 2.16 for local and levy, for a total of 3.19. So, Councillor Nero?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for clarification, we have the APH numbers now, and it shows 2.04 up there, and originally in the preliminary budget, we had 2.04. So nothing's changed?
No. That 2.04 is local and levy. It's all of them. APH is 193,000. Am I correct about that?
Sorry. I think I misspoke.
Oh, 2.16.
Yeah.
Okay.
2.04 was the beginning number, and then 2.16 is today's number. No, yeah, so the local levy, when we first proposed, were 2.04. There have been some adjustments which are highlighted. The main adjustment is an APH increase, so the local levies now is 2.16, so it went up 0.12. The largest part of that was APH. And thanks to the folks in the Conservation Authority, because you helped minimize the APH increase. Okay, so everybody sees where we're at. There's been an adjustment for the purposes of our unfunded list, so we'll go to the supplementary list now, unless the CFO has any further comments. Okay, so on the supplementary list, I frankly think we should have, before we move on past the 460, we should just briefly talk about that, because now that it's decreased, I don't know that you want to go at 230. You could probably go at 2 and be in the same spot because you took 130 out of it, right? So we'd be going more than half if we went at 230. So if you could just show the capital current increase as 200,000 and not 230,000, please. Okay. Now, what we're doing here is any city councilor that wants to move an item out of supplementary into discussion, feel free. You don't need a seconder, and then we'll do straw polls. So, Councillor Shoemaker, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a handful of them, but I'll start with number 2 on the list, which is third-party parking by law enforcement, the one-year pilot program for 25,000.
Can I see a show of hands as to who would be interested in including that in the? Okay, so we're going to move. That's included then.
6473, which is number 4, skating trail and block party programming.
So, yeah, so number 5, skating trail and block party programming.
Number 4.
Number 4, yeah, so who would be interested in that? Show of hands. Okay, so Councilor Nero?
Excuse me, are you going to discuss each one after? Or
Well,
just-
we'll discuss it when we're at it, so if you have a
When you're at
question,
it?
yeah, sure, go ahead.
Are we talking about looking at the total amount, or? Oh, no, it was the other one, the youth.
He's
team
moving
program
60,
was
he's moving
partial.
6473 into it.
Yeah. Okay, I got it. I will.
Okay, so interested in that? Can I see a show of hands? Okay, yeah, so that made it. So if you can include the 6473, number 4, please. Okay,
The one right next to it, number 5, 5,000 for security at the Northern Community Center.
any questions on that? Interested? You have questions? Go ahead, Councilor Vezo.
To Mr. Lamming. Mr. Lamming, if we give you some funding to have programming so that there would be staff at the NCC, such as, till 9 o'clock at night and things like that, would you need additional $5,000 for having someone do security because you're going to have staff in the building?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo, if council chooses to provide the funding for the teen / senior / youth space, we would have a presence there, so the need for the security would be diminished. So we could probably avoid having that request move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Lamming.
So why don't we just stand that one down until we discuss the other one?
Okay.
Number 11, the 3 apprenticeship positions, I would move to add one of them to the budget this year.
Okay, so that would be a third of that increase. So let's just start here. Is there anybody that wants to include the entire increase in the budget? Is there support for a third of the increase, so that 1 apprentice? Okay, so if we can divide that by 3, and there you go. Okay.
And then the traffic engineering advisory services for the 3 to 5 year contract for $30,000, which I believe is, I think Mr. Elliott correctly pointed out, this has come out of a significant number of council resolutions that have been on this topic. I've been the instigator of a number of them, so I feel an obligation to support this one.
Okay, so any questions on item 8, which is $30,000 for traffic engineering advisory services? Support for that item, show of hands. Okay, that would get included then. Okay, Councillor Dufour.
I'd like to add number 16, the increase to legal, and I'm putting forward the whole increase.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and speak against that. I understand why you want to do it, and at some point we might have to do it, but we haven't been told, we don't actually are not yet required to do it. And I've got a difficult problem with all of this downloading that's occurring. We've got conservation downloading, Algoma Public Health downloading. A big part of our increase here is from downloading. And I'm concerned about voluntarily accepting the download before we're required to accept the download. So my feeling, I mean, if council wants to put it in, you can go ahead and put it in. I won't support putting it in until we're required to do it. I do not think we should be incurring this cost on behalf of the province. These are provincial offenses, and the province should be paying to prosecute these offenses. So, anybody that wants to include that amount? So that doesn't go in there, Councilor Dufour? Anything else, Councilor Dufour?
Nope, that's it.
I have Councilor Nero, then Councilor Gardy, then Councilor Vezo-Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Number 3, the youth teen programming at NCC, at least partial or full. I would like to see at least partial, at least half.
Can we split that over 2 years?
Sure.
Do I have comfort from council to everybody comfortable with that? Could show of hands who would be agreeable to that? Okay, so put half that cost in then.
And a very small one, number 22, it's an in-kind. I guess we have to put in-kind services on here now.
Okay.
It's 22, it's $2,200.
Let's let them catch up with us here.
Okay. It's just in-kind.
Is that it for you, Councilor Nero?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Councilor Gardy?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I know Mr. Lamian had mentioned that, you know, if we gave funds for the youth programming over to the end take place at the NCC, that he wouldn't potentially require the $5,000 for the security. That being said, it's $5,000. I think it might go a long way to ensure that, you know, everyone in that facility is as safe as they need to be in and around it, especially with the commencement of a youth evenings and weekends. So could we, I'm in favor of giving them the $5,000 at this point.
Well, considering we didn't go all the way on the youth programming, do we have support for the $5,000 for security for that facility? Yeah, so include the $5,000, please, Jake. Is that it, Councilor Gardy? Yep. Okay. Councilor Hilsinger?
Thank you. There's $101,000 on this list to support arts and culture and heritage in Sault Ste. Marie. The cultural plan that we just completed in the last few months showed very clearly that this community spends 20% of the average of Northern Ontario communities supporting arts, culture, and heritage, which is a benefit to our society and it's a benefit to our economic growth. We spend now $1 per person on arts, culture, and heritage in Sault Ste. Marie. The average is $5. This increase of $101,000 will allow for public art to be installed in Sault Ste. Marie, which is greatly, we are in great need of. It will allow for us to create a new stream of funding for festivals and events, and it will allow us to change how local artists can apply for funds to support their work. So this is simply doubling our current $1 to $2. We are still vastly behind every other community. And I know it seems like a lot of money, but I would really ask us all to think about what matters here, and can we find the funds to make this this growth and this investment in what's going to be a very key part of the economy going forward.
Okay, any other comments on that? Questions about that? Councillor Hollingsworth and Councillor Vezo-Allen.
Thank you. I sat on the Cultural Advisory Committee, and actually I was disgusted on how low the amount was when we had to go through all these applications. So your points are definitely well taken, and thank you for saying that. And there's so many small, I call them grassroots arts and cultures out there that are just struggling and doing their own fundraising. So again, I thank you for saying that. So just for clarification, I think it was at 50,000, you said half, right, Councillor Hilsinger, was it 50,000 for like well over 15 years or something and has never been increased?
I prefer that to the specifics. Perhaps Mr. Vera could speak to the specifics of that. I don't want to say something wrong.
Yeah.
You want to just clarify our funding levels, Mr. Bear?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, yes, I believe it is at 53,000 right now for the grant portion.
Right, and I believe that it hasn't been increased for, gosh, like 14 years, 15 years, like a chunk of time. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, I just think that's important that everyone is educated on those points. Thank you.
Okay, so is there, Councillor Hilsinger, I'm just looking at that number again. It's down at, what number are we here on the
Six.
list?
It's number six.
Okay, 101,200. Is there support for that? Okay, so before we move on, because I do support that, Councillor Hilsinger, before we move on, is there support for two-staging this and putting half in this year and half next? Okay, so we'll put half in, so decrease that number by half, and we'll include half this year, and hopefully you make the same passionate address next year and we get the other half in.
I can make it again tomorrow.
Yeah. Were those your matters?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. I don't have anybody left on the list. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Vezoel.
It's because I'm short, way back here.
Well, let's be sweet.
Number 19, I would like to, shockingly, delete that from the list. I think that is something that
Well,
could...
it doesn't, if we don't pull it off here, it doesn't go in.
So
You don't have to delete it.
can I say I would like to have it pulled off?
As in, like, you don't want it considered at all by
Correct,
anybody?
because
ever?
funding could be found for that.
Sure.
Yeah.
But like, if it's not moved off here, it's not going in.
Okay.
So
Then we're good.
it's more or less deleted.
One less delete.
Yeah, it's
Then
more
we're
or less,
good.
it's more or less deleted. Councillor Dufour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to ask a quick question of Mr. Ver, if that's okay, especially in recognition of the folks from Fringe who've sat here quite diligently throughout this budgeting process. With the increase to the arts and cultural funding of $50,000, would that increase the envelope that their festival would be able to apply to for this coming year?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, I think the preliminary answer would be yes. We would have to come back to council with the updated criteria for that, but we would imagine groups like Fringe would be able to apply to that increased fund.
And I think there's a potential other avenue too, which is that we will be developing the tourism marketing fund, not tourism marketing fund, but
Municipal accommodations?
yeah. So we have a MAT, and one of the things we're doing with the MAT is developing a fund that festivals and whatnot can apply to for resources, and that'll start for 2020. So there might be another avenue there.
Excellent, and that just confirms that funding for this current 2020 will still be available through this process. Thank you.
That's correct, Dave. Mr. Bear? Okay. Okay, so, Councillor Bruni?
Number 18, it's only for 24,000, but.
That's off.
That's off?
Yeah. Yeah. That's that's EDF, we're not funding the EDC. They put that request in prior to the change we've made.
Okay.
Anything else, Councillor Bruni?
No.
Okay. I have Councillor Hollingsworth and Councillor Christian.
Mayor, just for clarification, again, we've been taking items off. So I think last year what we did is that we looked for money for roads. After we talked about taking money off, I remember last year we had a discussion saying, okay, we have now this pot of money that we took off, and I think we put some money back into the roads. Will we be having that conversation tonight?
Well, they're asking for 500,000.
Right, but I think 500,000 should be increased more. I mean, 2021's around the corner. I would like to have a discussion about, can we give them some more money?
Well, they don't have the 500,000 yet. So
Well,
you'd have to
I'd
move-
like to be positive. You never know, because I just throwing that out there now.
But that's what we're doing right now, and right now they don't have the 500 grand. So, like, if you want to move the 500 grand, we can have that discussion.
Well, then I move the 500.
Okay. So, is there any questions about that? Councillor Dufour?
show where we currently stand?
Can you?
As far as the supplementals that are currently moved over?
Can we have the
What's that
CFO's
total
mic,
right
please?
now?
Currently, we don't have our other spreadsheet updated, but with everything that's been asked for to date, we're at 1.42 for the city share, bringing a total municipal levy at 3.58.
So 1.42, so we're getting close to 1.5.
Okay.
Okay, so that brings you up to date. Did you want to add something to that, Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Mayor, members of
Mr. CEO.
council, I've just discovered with the CFO that our most recent supplementary list wasn't the one that was on the agenda. It did have one additional item, which was to increase the grant to the physician recruitment and retention program for $50,000. I'll ask Shelley just to note that. For background, council will remember the presentation from the physician recruitment and retention manager that noted that the city's contribution is $90,000 per year with the funding partners. The reason it's on the supplementary list this year is because you've been funding that out of a reserve for quite some time. It was a reserve that was built up with interest on the hospital levy that we had for contributing to the new hospital. That levy will be running out during this calendar year, or during this next fiscal year. So in order for the city to contribute its full $90,000 for 2020, you would need to add $50,000 to the levy. We still have $40,000 in the reserve to cover off part of the year. But to get to the full funding, you would need to add $50,000 to the levy. This just includes the operations of the recruitment staff and the recruitment efforts. It does not include what has been done separately as for particular inducements for physicians to move here. The committee has discussed that item, and they at this time aren't looking at having those additional specific inducements that are given to recruit physicians. So this is just for the operations of the committee.
I think it's important to recognize this isn't an increase to our physician recruitment commitment. It's just that the money we use for it is running out, and there's nothing in the levy for it. So we would have to put this in the levy to continue to fund our basic requirement under that. So, I mean, I think everybody to a person agrees physician recruitment has always been important and continues to be important. I think we have a challenge on the horizon with physician recruitment, particularly specialists, and I don't think this would be the time, even though the money's run out in our levy, I don't think this would be the time to stop supporting that project. So I would move including the 50, which gets us through 2020, and then we have to come back to council with a new financing model for that. So do we have support for including the 50,000? So there is, so if we can include that, please. Jake, now we're on the 500. Any other support for increasing roads budget? Councillor Christian?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask a question of Chief Johnson regarding 13, Fire Incident Command.
No, you can't. We're on number 9. So we're talking about the 500,000 for resurfacing. We can come to you after that. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Vezo-Allen.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Elliott, if we were to do that 500,000 over 2 years, so 250 this year and 250 next year, would that be advantageous, or would that amount not really impact what you're able to do in terms of road repair?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Vezo-Allen, any addition to that budget will help.
Okay.
Okay, so.
Thank you.
I think roads are important, and I think we need to support them. I'm not at this time because, we're getting to a point with the levy increases where I'm not comfortable going myself much higher. So I won't be supporting this request, Mr. Elliott. not because I don't think it's sincere that you don't need it or that you wouldn't use it well. I think all those things are the case. I just think we're tight on what we can do as a municipality. Anyway, go ahead, Councillor Hilsinger.
A question about that. So talking about in the capital forecasts for the upcoming 4 years in the public works budgets, which is somewhere in around the $30 million range and increasing to 42, like how does that, do those things you're thinking about now eventually get factored into these other numbers in future years, or?
Mr. Mayor to Councillor Hilsinger, they don't really, because this miscellaneous budget is not, just resurfacing roads and doing miscellaneous small things aren't included in the full asset management plan. The asset management plan looks at big items.
This is a pot of funds that they have
Yes.
year over year,
Yeah.
that they have year over year to do miscellaneous kind of road work jobs. This is just increasing it.
Right.
They have it now.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Bruni?
Mr. Elliott, regarding the resurfacing small capital projects, what are we looking at resurfacing? This is not pothole repairs. It's a little bit bigger than potholes?
Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bruni.
Before we go,
Yep.
before you go on, is it sectional, section of a street, et cetera? Go.
Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bruni, the good example is this year's miscellaneous paving or resurfacing program included the portion of Pym Street, the top of the hill, Queen Street near Amber, Allen Side Road. Sometimes we do crack filling. That's what that budget includes. It also includes rear yard drainage, includes all of our road-associated environmental assessments, and it includes your mandated biennial bridge inspections, structural inspections, and aqueduct inspections. And over and above that, there's an outstanding miscellaneous construction list of primarily put together over the years of the wishes of council, small projects that need to be completed. And that, the last estimate of that is $13 million. And I'm not doing any projects on that list at all.
Okay. So the pothole repairs would come from Public Works?
Mr. Mayor to Council Bruni, that's correct. That's maintenance, pothole work is done. We do some large patches when if a road gets so bad in the spring, we have to close a lane. In some of our miscellaneous paving contracts, we do sometimes full lane width for a period. We call them small patches. They're portions of road that cannot be maintained with pothole repair anymore. We have done some of those. But potholes are all under the maintenance budget.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Hollingsworth, you had something to add?
Yes. Thank you for explaining, Mr. Elliott, but I think you're still not doing it justification, because looking at backyard drainage is not just an individual's backyard. Give you an example, and if I'm wrong, but bottom Shannon, there's a whole strip of land that's not very wide, but it has our culvert that goes into the St. Mary's River. It hasn't been touched for, 15 years, and it's all rusty. And so that might be classified as a small project, but that is going to be linking into our river system and into the smaller creeks. The other piece, too, is bridge inspections. And my question to you is, if we start these bridge inspections now, does that mean that in the future, when we have to do them in 2021 to prove to the promise we have, we're ahead of the game? And the other thing is, with all the flooding that has happened over the last couple months, and in the future, we're going to have more flooding, ditches, and so forth. Mr. Elliott, do you want to continue on commenting? I think this is very serious, guys.
Mr. Mayor to Councillor Hollingsworth, the Lower Shannon Road culvert is a good example of a small project that would be put on the outstanding miscellaneous construction list. We get a design together, we get a cost estimate together, we put it on that list. That's the list that I speak of that totals many millions of dollars that we don't get to unless we make it some sort of a priority. Rear yard drainage is a small portion of this budget that our technical staff uses not to fix rear yard. We don't do work on private property, but sometimes the city's obligated to provide an outlet to the property line, and that's where that That's what that budget is used for.
Right. And also sinkholes that have happened on Gardner Street where around the drainage, they just absolutely sink and the road collapses. Is that correct?
Sinkholes in Sault Ste. Marie are typically a failure of the pipe under the road. It's not like we're not Florida, we don't have major underground systems that cause that. But yeah, that's a typical small repair that Public Works would look after, that would usually be followed by a bigger capital works project, such as Pym Street. There were sinkholes on Pym Street that Public Works looked after, and we eventually, that eventually became a large capital project.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for clarification. I guess these things just happen in Ward 1, but thank you.
Okay, so is there a show of hands is support for the $500,000 for resurfacing small capital projects? I asked if there was support for the resurfacing small capital projects. Okay, so that's not going to move off. So if we can move on then, are there any other items on the list? Councillor Christian?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just a question to Chief Johnson regarding 13, Fire Incident Command Online and Practical Training System. Could you explain what that is and what we gain from the expense or the investment rather?
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, the breakdown of the initial $40,000, that includes the hardware, like tablets, the initial training of 40 officers, acting officers, instructor training. We would train 2 individuals to become instructors within our department so that we wouldn't have to have the initial investment come back. They'd be the instructors on an ongoing basis for us. And some software. Also, what the training encompasses, a quick review would be assumptions, confirmation, and positioning of our command units, situational evaluation, like a size up of the scene, communications, deployment management, strategic and incident action planning, organization, review evaluation, and transfer and termination of command. And those are all strategies and tactics that we use on scene.
And it says in here, per fire master plan, and now I know that we went through great time and expense, and I just want to be clear that that's in there because it's a recommendation of the fire master plan that this or something similar to that, or this be implemented. Is that correct?
Yes, it was to enhance our service delivery.
Okay, I'd like to bring this forward. It seems to me that...
So the 40,000?
Yep. It seems important to me, and it's...
Any other questions? Any questions about that? Any support for that? Okay. Doesn't look like it'll carry. Okay. So any additional items in the list? Okay, so we'll just go this way. Councilor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Seeing as that one failed, I'll bring up the next two, 14 and 15, which are quite small, but they're from the fire master plan as well. So I'd like to put those out. Officer training, emergency vehicle training.
So number 14, 15 for a total of 5,000. Support for that. So that'll carry on to the list then. Jake, if you can add the 4,000 and the 1,000, please. Okay, Councilor Dufour.
Sorry, I don't have another item. I was just asking to make sure that is the capital from current included in the $200,000?
Yes, they are.
Is it included in the total that's at the bottom? Because it's still in the G column. Okay. I was just wondering what the full total was.
I think it's in the number that Shelley gave us. Yeah, yes. So that was 1.4 something before that.
Yeah, so it's 499. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gardy.
Yeah, I just have a question to follow up on number 11, if I could, the 3 apprenticeship positions. if this is something that we wanted to commit to moving forward, like one a year for the next couple of years after 2020, is that something that we could kind of do now, or would we bring forward in a future meeting?
It'll be returned to budget next year.
Okay.
Based on our comments today, when
Oh,
they budget
okay.
next year, they'll add another position.
Perfect, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Clarification. I know that we said no to the 500,000.
Yeah.
But we did not, and I'd like to ask, would we consider just 100,000?
Okay, so the request is to consider 100,000 of the 500,000. Do we have any interest in that? Show of hands. No, that doesn't look like it's going to carry. Okay, any other matters off the supplemental list? Seeing none, do you need a break?
Budget that I'd like to.
Okay, so Councillor Shoemaker, before we take a break, then Councillor Shoemaker wants to raise a matter on operating.
Yes, it is the PW equipment reserve, which has been earmarked at 250 as an addition to the levy this year, and I would like to move to phase that in over 2 years.
Okay, so we're still in committee of the whole, so there's because of a resolution we passed earlier in the year to increase Public Works, which fund was that, Larry, that we increased by 250?
The equipment.
That was for the equipment?
Yeah, equipment fund. Staff included that in the original levy calculations. What Councillor Shoemaker is suggesting here is we phase that in over 2 years, so instead of including 250 in the calculation, it would be 125, which would bring down that levy number by 0.125. So before we move forward, is there support for that idea? If there is support for that idea, we would draft a resolution and we would pass it in open. Is there support for that idea? Is there, yeah, if you have a question, Councillor Vezuela?
To raise a question to Mr. Girardi. So 125 over 2 years, would that satisfy some equipment purchases for you?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Vezuela, certainly we've been after council for many years to have this increased. We get the increase and now you're cutting it in half. I don't know, it's council's decision on what direction you want to go. I'd certainly see the 250 it'd be more beneficial, but if the 125 is the choice that council makes tonight, so be it.
Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor, one second, Councillor Dufour. Councillor Gardy?
Yeah, I'm going to echo what Mr. Girardi said. The essence of this motion and originally was the fact that not only did they require, equipment, but then, it really took a toll last year and the year prior with some pretty severe winters. So, we got to put our money where our mouth is once in a while. We want to deliver the services that we all get the calls for, right? So the snow removal are the calls that we get. So, I'm not looking to decrease. The original motion resolution was $250,000 as a commitment to the people who, have to drive around our community and get out of their driveways and, get up our hills in the middle of the winter. And this gentleman and his team, a team who for the better part of the evening were here behind us, need this money. They've been asking for a long time. The 250 probably isn't going to go a heck of a long way, but it's going to go a lot longer than 125. So I would urge all of councillors to keep it at 250, please.
Councillor Dufour?
Was the original request, Mr. Girardi, not 750,000?
It was 750
It was
over 3 years.
750, and we took it down to 250.
Yeah.
So, I would echo what Councillor Gardy is saying, to cut it in half again after we already only granted a third of it to begin with. $250,000 probably doesn't buy a whole lot of plow trucks, so I would support leaving it as is.
Did you want to speak to that before we move on, Councillor Shoemaker?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've heard, and I respect Mr. Girardi's view that it should be higher. And of course, it should be higher, but we're not here to solve all of the corporation's problems in a single year. We have had council, and I'm responsible for some of it, but we've had council add, could we scroll down to the bottom of that spreadsheet?
Go to $500,000.
$499,000 this year to the budgets, and 299 if you don't count the 200,000 that we're amortizing over 6 years. And not a single councillor has brought forward a resolution on how to reduce amounts that are in the budget. So this is one of those things. I urge you, unlike Councillor Gardy, I'm of the belief that we don't have to put our money where our mouth is. This is the taxpayer money. And so unless you councillors want to find specific savings to offset each increase that they propose, that they support this recommended savings that I am proposing, and I'll consider the ones that you all put forward.
So I want to make one comment, and it's not for or against the position, and Councillor Shoemaker, but, you know, we worked hard, I worked hard with staff, and staff worked hard to bring a budget to council that had a 1% increase, a 1.04. So it wasn't a situation where, and I want to acknowledge staff for that, and I want to speak to this. Often we had budget increases that were 3 or 4 or 5. We started at 1. So like we worked really hard to make sure that we brought a budget that was really responsible and prudent. And so some of those, you know, efforts were made pre-budget so that tonight we didn't, you know, have to, you know, deliberate over a significant number of cuts and maybe make some rash decisions. So I'd like to think our starting point is one of the reasons why we are where we are. Okay, so on the, it's really a matter of whether there's support for the idea of amortizing the $250,000 increase over 2 years. And if there is, that will go in the budget. If there isn't, it won't. So can I have a show of hands for that proposition that Councillor Shoemaker proposed? So that's not going to fly. It stays at 250. Okay, so I think that covers a lot of the deliberation. Staff needs to take a break to go through what we've done and put it together for us and put the resolutions together. So while we're in committee of the whole, we're not going to leave committee of the whole. We're just going to take a 5-minute break. You can get out of your seats, you can go to the washroom, and we'll convene back here at 10 to 8.
Yeah, I think I've got it, but.
Contractual increases, okay, she's got parking enforcement contractual increases, she has 115,000. Did they, I thought it was 25,000.
Want me to get my laptop?
No, sale of Ontario Works Building, payment, those are revenues, okay. Revenue, increases, gym club, so those were already there. Oh, okay, those were from the adjustments.
Yeah.
That's the downtown ones, sorry. Third parking, 2,500, skating 12,674. Youth teen program, oh, I thought they got rid of that.
No. They were talking about it, they couldn't.
So 50,000, I'm surprised, I didn't have that one. Public Works, yeah, she rounded up like I did, okay, 30,000. Officer training, vehicle training, Queen Street, oh, I missed Queen Street Cruise.
We'll come out of the committee of the whole and we'll pass the motions for it. Like, but you're going to do that?
Staff for organizing that as quickly as you did. So once all the councilors have a seat, I'm going to ask, okay, so on the screen, what we have is our starting point and what you added itemized. So the total city budget increase, the city side, our budget, is 1.47%. That's including everything we just discussed in committee of the whole and that you included in committee of the whole. We're not going to rise from committee of the whole until, I give you all a chance to have any further discussion, ask any question. So look at the list. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you want to talk about it more. If you're all comfortable with it, I personally am. We'll rise from the committee of the whole. We'll move into open. We'll pass our necessary resolutions. Okay, has council, everybody had a chance to look at that? So Councillor Shoemaker and Councillor, I think, Nero are indicating we can, so we'll have the motion to rise from committee of the whole, Madam Clerk.
I have a motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Christian that the committee of the whole council now rise and report on the matter referred to it by City Council 2020 budget deliberations.
All in favor? Carried. So we are now back in our regular rules of procedure. Madam Clerk, if you can continue, please.
Okay, I have a motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Hollingsworth, resolved that the 2020 operating budget be approved with the following adjustments. Parking enforcement contractual increase, $15,000. Sale of Ontario Works building increase, $128,513. Payment in lieu revenue increase of $116,644. Revenue increase from new fire user fees, $1,525. Gym club adjustment increase of $7,608. Capital from current increase, $200,000. Third-party parking bylaw enforcement outside downtown core, $25,000. Skating trail and block party programs, $6,473. Security at Northern Community Centre, $5,000. Youth teen programming at Northern Community Centre, $48,330. Funding to support arts, culture, and heritage, $50,600. Public Works apprenticeship position, $79,318. Traffic engineering advisory services, $30,000. Officer training fire services, $4,000. Emergency vehicle training fire services, $1,000. Sault Ste. Marie Queen Street Cruise, $2,200 in kind. And the physician recruitment and retention program, $50,000, resulting in an increase in the corporate portion of the municipal levy from 2019 in the amount of 1.47%.
All in favor? Motion carried. Madam Clerk?
That was unanimous, was it?
I believe that was unanimous. I didn't see your hand, Councillor.
I just agreed with that.
So you're opposed to it? Okay, so it wasn't. It was one opposition. Councillor Hollingsworth was opposed.
Okay. And a motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Christian, resolved that the 2020 capital budget and financing sources be approved with the following changes. Remove traffic cameras on Bay Street, $126,500. Further, that council directs staff to utilize internal debt to fund the total adjusted unfunded capital amount of $2,174,900 as follows. Increase capital from current by $200,000 to service internal debt in 2020. Apply the additional PUC dividend of $400,000 declared in 2019 to the 2020 internal debt. Fund the remaining balance of 2020 internal debt servicing through the levy after the 2019 surplus allocation equally each year from 2021 through 2024.
All in favor? Motion carried unanimously.
have a motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Hollingsworth, resolved that the 2020 levies and local boards be approved with the following amendments. Sault Ste. Marie Region Conservation Authority decrease of $58,000. Algoma Public Health levy increase $193,438, resulting in an increase to the levy and local board portion of the municipal levy from 2019 of 2.16%.
All in favor? Motion carried unanimously.
And a motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Christian, resolved that the overall 2020 municipal levy, corporate and levy and local boards of $119,167,177 be approved.
All in favor? Motion carried unanimously.
Yep.
So before we adjourn, council, I just want to again recognize the effort staff put in. This budget was a result of a lot of listening. Staff paid close attention to what we said all year long and worked hard to incorporate that into the budgeting process, which I think is why we started where we did. And it's also a result of the hard work you did. So I want to thank all of you. I find you to be a very constructive group who has no problem thinking about and focusing on the community interest. And you have a very difficult job in trying to balance the cost of providing services to our taxpayers with the importance of investing in our community. So I want to recognize all of you for your hard work in the entire year leading up to tonight. And I think we can have a productive year next year, and I think we're going to make some important investments in our community, but at the same time, I think we did that in a very responsible way that is respectful of our ratepayer. So I want to thank all of you for that. Madam Clerk, if we can have a motion to adjourn, please.
I have a motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Hollingsworth that this council shall now adjourn.
All in favor? Carried.